The crystal chandelier caught the light of Victor DeLuca's diamond cufflinks as his hand settled possessively on Maya Collins's waist. And in that moment, across the crowded Miami ballroom, Ethan Rowe's champagne glass nearly slipped from his fingers. The woman he'd once called forgettable now stood draped in midnight silk beside the most dangerous man in Florida, her chin raised, her eyes blazing with the kind of confidence he'd spent years trying to destroy. Ethan had come to this gala expecting power players and political theater. What he hadn't expected was to see his greatest mistake walking toward him on the arm of a man who could make people disappear with a whispered word. Before we begin, if you're loving this story of second chances and dangerous redemption, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far Maya's journey reaches across the world. The Fontainebleau Miami Beach had transformed into something between a palace and a promise. Beneath vaulted ceilings that seemed to touch the stars themselves, Miami's elite circulated like schools of brilliantly colored fish, each more dazzling than the last, each calculating their next move in the endless game of influence and power. The annual Coastal Conservation Gala drew them all: politicians with practiced smiles, businessmen with calculating eyes, socialites whose jewelry could fund small nations, and the occasional criminal whose donations somehow always cleared without question. Maya Collins stood near the Eastern Terrace doors, her emerald silk gown catching the light in ways that made her appear almost ethereal. The dress had cost more than her first car, a gift from Victor that she'd initially refused until he'd simply had it delivered to her apartment with a note that read, "You'll need armor tonight. Wear it." At the time, she hadn't understood. Now, surveying the room with eyes trained by 18 months of working for Miami's most feared man, she recognized the gala for what it truly was: a battlefield dressed in Dior and Tom Ford. Her fingers curved around the stem of her champagne glass with practiced ease, though she hadn't taken more than a polite sip. Victor had taught her that awareness was survival, and alcohol dulled the edges she needed to stay sharp. Even now, as she appeared to be simply another beautiful woman at another beautiful party, her mind cataloged exits, identified security personnel, and noted which conversations caused subtle shifts in body language across the room. "You're doing it again," came a low voice beside her, rich with amusement and something darker. Maya didn't startle. She'd felt Victor DeLuca's approach the way some people sense a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm. He moved through the world with a kind of controlled danger that made even the most powerful men step aside without quite knowing why they were doing it. Tonight, in a black tuxedo that had been tailored with the precision of a surgeon's blade, he looked like old money and new threats wrapped into one devastating package. "Doing what?" Maya asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "Working." Victor's hand found the small of her back, the touch light but unmistakably possessive. "I brought you here to enjoy yourself, not to run reconnaissance on every trust fund narcissist in South Florida." "You brought me here because Senator Morrison is planning to introduce legislation that would complicate your shipping operations, and you wanted him to see that you're a pillar of environmental conservation." Maya's lips curved slightly. "I'm working because you're working. We just do it differently." Something flickered in Victor's dark eyes. Appreciation, perhaps, or the kind of satisfaction a chess master feels when their opponent makes an unexpectedly brilliant move. At 42, Victor DeLuca carried his power the way other men carried family heirlooms, carefully, but with absolute confidence in its value. His features were strong, almost severe, with the kind of bone structure that would look commanding even in old age. But it was his eyes that truly defined him: dark, intelligent, and capable of shifting from warmth to Arctic cold in the space between heartbeats. "You've learned too well," he murmured, though his hand remained steady against her back. "Should I be concerned that my assistant now thinks like a strategist?" "Your executive assistant," Maya corrected softly. "And you should be concerned if I didn't." The promotion had come 6 months ago, along with a significant raise in an office adjacent to Victor's own. It had also come with unspoken expectations: late nights reviewing contracts, early mornings preparing briefings, and a level of trust that Victor extended to almost no one. Maya had accepted it all with the same quiet competence that had first caught his attention, never quite acknowledging the shift in their dynamic, even as everyone around them began to notice. Victor's mouth quirked slightly. Touché. Now, shall we? He stopped mid-sentence, his entire body going still in a way that made Maya's pulse quicken. She'd seen this before. The predator catching a scent, the king noticing a threat to his board. Victor's gaze had locked onto something across the ballroom, and when Maya followed his line of sight, her own breath caught in her throat. Ethan Rose stood near the bar, laughing at something a silver-haired businessman had said. He looked exactly as Maya remembered, tall, classically handsome in the way that privilege often manufactures. His sandy hair artfully styled, his tuxedo expensive but somehow lacking the quiet menace of Victor's. At 35, Ethan had the kind of face that appeared on Miami's most eligible lists, symmetrical, friendly, utterly conventional. Maya had loved that face once. She'd traced those features with trembling fingers, kissed that smile, believed the words that came from that mouth. For 18 months, she'd shaped herself around Ethan Rose's expectations, becoming smaller and quieter and more apologetic until she'd nearly forgotten who she'd been before him. "That's him," Victor said quietly. It wasn't a question. Maya's throat felt tight. "How did you... You think I don't notice when you go still every time someone mentions the Rowe family name?" Victor's hand moved from her back to her waist, drawing her fractionally closer. "You think I haven't memorized every micro-expression that crosses your face when you're uncomfortable?" The intimacy of the observation should have frightened her. Instead, it settled something in Maya's chest, the knowledge that someone had been paying attention, really paying attention, not to control her but to understand her. "He can't hurt you anymore," Victor continued, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated through Maya's bones. "Not unless you let him." "I don't want him to hurt me." Maya lifted her chin, drawing on every ounce of the strength she'd rebuilt over the past 2 years. "I want him to see what he lost." Victor's smile was slow, dangerous, and entirely approving. "Then let's make sure he gets an excellent view." Before Maya could respond, Victor was guiding her forward through the crowd. People parted instinctively, some because they recognized Victor DeLuca and understood that obstacles in his path had a tendency to be removed, others simply responding to the sheer force of will he projected. Maya moved with him, her training kicking in automatically, shoulders back, chin up, every step deliberate and graceful in heels that had cost more than her monthly rent used to be. They were 10 feet away when Ethan noticed them. His laugh died mid-sound, his champagne glass freezing halfway to his lips. Maya watched recognition flash across his features, followed immediately by confusion. This wasn't the woman he remembered, the one who'd apologized for taking up space, who'd dressed in muted colors and spoken in self-deprecating whispers. This woman wore confidence like a second skin, moved like royalty, and stood beside Victor DeLuca as though she belonged there. "Ethan," Maya said, her voice steady and cool as lake water. "What an unexpected surprise." Ethan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Maya, I didn't know you'd be here. Why would you?" The question was genuine curiosity, not accusation. "We haven't spoken in over 2 years. "Right, yes. Of course." Ethan's eyes darted to Victor, and Maya saw the exact moment he registered who stood beside her. His face went pale beneath his expensive tan. "Mr. DeLuca, I didn't realize that you and Maya were..." Victor's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Maya's waist. "Were what, exactly?" The temperature around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. The businessman who'd been talking to Ethan suddenly remembered an urgent phone call and vanished into the crowd. Nearby conversations faltered as people registered Victor's tone. Not loud, not aggressive, but carrying the kind of quiet menace that made survival instincts kick into overdrive. "I just meant..." Ethan stumbled over his words in a way that would have seemed impossible for someone with his pedigree. "I'm surprised to see Maya here, at this kind of event. She never enjoyed these sorts of things when we were together." "Perhaps," Victor said with devastating calm, "she simply didn't enjoy them with you." Maya felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain, but the opposite. The fierce satisfaction of watching someone who'd once made her feel worthless, now fumbling before a man who treated her like she mattered. She should have felt petty. Instead, she felt free. Ethan used to say I wasn't sophisticated enough for high society, Maya heard herself say, her voice carrying just enough to reach the people who'd begun listening shamelessly. He worried I'd embarrass him at important functions. It's amazing what the right partner can change. Victor's eyes gleamed with something that might have been pride. Maya is the most sophisticated person in this room, present company very much included. That's not... I didn't mean... Ethan's composure was crumbling visibly. Maya, you're taking that out of context. Am I? Maya tilted her head, genuinely curious. Which part? When you told me I laughed too loud at your colleagues' jokes? When you suggested I skip your firm's holiday party because I wouldn't fit in? Or when you ended things by saying I was perfectly nice, just not special enough for where you're going? She watched Ethan's face cycle through denial, recognition, and finally a desperate attempt at damage control. Around them, the eavesdropping had become shameless. Maya recognized 3 board members from Ethan's family company, a gossip columnist who'd already pulled out her phone, and at least 2 of Ethan's former fraternity brothers. "You're making me sound like a villain," Ethan said, attempting a laugh that came out strangled. "We were young. I was thoughtless. But I never meant to hurt you." "No," Maya agreed softly. "You just meant to reshape me into something more convenient. The hurting was incidental." Victor had remained silent through this exchange, his presence a solid weight against Maya's side. Now he spoke, his voice carrying the kind of absolute authority that comes from never having been successfully challenged. "I think we've exhausted this conversation. Maya, would you like to continue engaging with Mr. Rowe, or shall we move on to more worthwhile pursuits?" The choice was deliberate. Victor giving Maya agency in the moment Ethan had once tried to strip it away. She could end this now, walk away with dignity intact, or she could continue the confrontation. Either way, Victor would support her decision without question or judgment. Maya met Ethan's eyes one final time, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time ever. A man who measured worth by convenience, who valued presentation over substance, who would spend his life surrounded by people but never truly knowing any of them. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and final, "I think we're done here." She turned into Victor's body, allowing him to guide her away. Behind them, she heard Ethan call her name, plaintive, confused, angry. She didn't look back. "That was well done," Victor murmured as they moved toward the terrace doors, "though I had several less diplomatic responses prepared if you'd needed them." "Like what?" "Well, I own the building that houses his family's corporate offices. The lease comes up for renewal in 6 months." Victor's tone was conversational, almost pleasant. It would be unfortunate if they suddenly couldn't find appropriate space in their preferred location. Maya stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "You would do that? Disrupt their business because he was rude to me at a party?" "Maya." Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. "I would burn this entire city to ashes if someone truly hurt you. Relocating his family's office would be a Tuesday afternoon." The declaration should have frightened her. Everything about Victor DeLuca should have frightened her. The rumors, the power, the barely leashed violence that hummed beneath his civilized surface. Instead, standing in the warm Miami night with his hand on her face and his eyes burning into hers, Maya felt safer than she had in years. "That's excessive," she whispered. "Yes." Victor's smile was sharp enough to cut. "But I've never been a moderate man." The terrace stretched before them, strings of lights turning the space into something magical. Below, the ocean whispered against the shore, indifferent to the human dramas playing out in the ballroom. Victor led Maya to the stone railing, his hand never leaving her waist, his body angled slightly to keep her sheltered from the wind. For several minutes, they stood in comfortable silence. Maya had learned this about Victor over their months working together. He didn't feel compelled to fill every silence with meaningless chatter. He could simply exist beside someone, present and attentive, without demanding constant engagement. "Are you all right?" he asked finally. Maya considered the question seriously. "I thought seeing him again would hurt more, or maybe hurt less. Instead, it just feels hollow, like looking at a photograph of someone I used to know." "That's growth." Victor's thumb traced small circles against her waist, the gesture almost unconscious. When the past loses its power to wound you, you know you've truly moved beyond it. Is that from experience? Extensive experience. Something dark flickered across Victor's features. Though my ghosts are considerably less civilized than yours. Maya knew better than to push when Victor's past surfaced. He shared pieces of himself carefully, deliberately, each revelation a gift that had to be earned through patience and understanding. She'd learned about his father's early death, his mother's struggle to keep their family restaurant alive, his first taste of real power when he'd protected their neighborhood from developers who wanted to raise everything for luxury condos. But there were gaps in his history. Years unaccounted for, scars whose origins he never explained, connections to people and organizations that Maya suspected but didn't ask about. "Do you want to go back inside?" Victor asked. "Or would you prefer to leave?" "I want—" Maya stopped, surprised by the certainty in her own chest. "I want to go back in there and dance. I want everyone who ever made me feel small to see exactly how far I've come. And I want Ethan Rowe to watch every moment of it." Victor's smile was slow and absolutely wicked. "As you wish." He took her hand, threading their fingers together in a gesture that felt simultaneously natural and monumental. They'd touched before, countless times in the course of working together, the occasional brush of hands when passing documents, his palm at her back guiding her through crowded restaurants when they worked through dinner. But this felt different, intentional, a public claim that would erase any doubt about their connection. The ballroom had shifted in their absence. The band had started playing, something slow and sultry that turned the space into an elegant fever dream. Couples swayed across the floor while others watched from the sidelines, their champagne glasses catching the light like tiny chandeliers. Victor led Maya directly to the center of the dance floor, not to the edges where they could maintain relative privacy, but to the absolute middle where everyone could see them. His hand found her waist as hers settled on his shoulder, their joined hands extending in perfect ballroom form. "I should warn you," Maya murmured as they began to move, "I'm not a very good dancer." "You're excellent at everything you commit to." Victor pulled her closer, eliminating the proper distance between them. "Dancing is no different. Just follow my lead." He moved with the same controlled precision he brought to everything else, each step deliberate, each turn executed with mathematical accuracy. But there was something else too, something that transformed technical skill into genuine artistry. He made Maya feel weightless, anticipating her movements before she'd fully committed to them, adjusting his hold to support her through spins that should have been beyond her skill level. Around them, Maya felt the weight of attention. She didn't need to look to know that people were watching, whispering, calculating what this meant. Victor DeLuca didn't dance. He attended galas when necessary, made appropriate donations, shook hands with people who both feared and needed him. But he didn't dance, didn't put himself on display, didn't show favoritism or attachment to anyone, until tonight. "You're causing quite a stir," Maya said softly, hyper-aware of his hand burning against her waist, his chest solid beneath her palm. "Good." Victor's eyes never left hers. "Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them understand that you're under my protection." "Is that what I am? Protected?" "Among other things." His hand flexed against her waist. "Maya, you have to know—" "Well, isn't this cozy?" The voice cut through the music like a blade through silk. Maya turned her head to find Ethan standing at the edge of the dance floor, his champagne glass empty, his face flushed with something that might have been alcohol or rage or humiliation. Victor stopped moving, though his arms remained locked around Maya. "Mr. Rowe, I thought we'd concluded our conversation." "I just find it fascinating," Ethan continued, his words slightly slurred, "that Maya went from being too unsophisticated for corporate dinners to dancing with Victor DeLuca in the span of 2 years. Makes a man wonder what changed." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Around them, conversation stopped entirely. The band played on, oblivious, creating a surreal soundtrack to the confrontation. Maya felt Victor's entire body go rigid. The man who'd been holding her with such careful tenderness transformed into something else entirely, something cold and deadly and utterly focused. His hand left her waist, and before Maya could process what was happening, he'd closed the distance to Ethan with 3 precise steps. "Choose your next words very carefully," Victor said, his voice barely above a whisper, "because they will determine whether you leave this gala on your feet or on a stretcher." Ethan's bravado crumbled instantly. Up close, faced with the full force of Victor's attention, he seemed to shrink into himself. I just meant that it's surprising. You meant to imply that Maya traded favors for advancement." Victor's words were surgical in their precision. "You meant to reduce a brilliant, capable woman to a transaction because you cannot fathom that someone might value her for her actual worth. And you meant to do it publicly, to wound her in front of people whose opinions matter. That's not... I don't care what you think you meant." Victor leaned closer, and Maya saw Ethan actually flinch. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Maya. Then you're going to leave this gala and never speak to her again. And if I ever hear that you've said one word about her character, her integrity, or her relationship with me, I will make it my personal mission to dismantle everything your family has built over 3 generations. Do you understand?" The threat wasn't empty. Maya could see its weight in Ethan's eyes, in the way his hands trembled slightly, in how he nodded before words could form. "I'm sorry, Maya," Ethan managed, not quite meeting her eyes. "That was inappropriate." Maya stepped forward, positioning herself beside Victor. She could have let him handle this entirely. Part of her wanted to watch Victor defend her honor like something out of a Gothic novel. But that would make her a damsel, and she'd spent 2 years becoming something far more dangerous. "Ethan," she said quietly, and something in her tone made him finally look at her. "I don't need Victor to fight my battles. I'm perfectly capable of destroying you myself, but I won't, because you're not worth the effort. You're a small man who makes himself feel big by making others feel small. And that's the saddest thing I can imagine." She turned back to Victor, who watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Pride, certainly. Desire, possibly. But something else, too. Something that looked like recognition. Like seeing an equal where he'd expected to find someone who needed protecting. "Shall we continue our dance?" Maya asked, extending her hand. Victor took it without hesitation, leading her back to the center of the floor as Ethan retreated toward the exit. The band had transitioned to something new, slower, more intimate. Victor pulled Maya close again, but this time there was no pretense of proper form. Her head rested against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and they swayed together in a way that had nothing to do with technique and everything to do with claiming a moment as theirs alone. "You didn't need me to step in," Victor murmured against her hair. "You had him completely dismantled." "I needed you to stand beside me," Maya corrected. "There's a difference." She felt him exhale, felt some tension leave his shoulders. "Maya, I need to tell you something." Her heart kicked against her ribs. "What?" "This..." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, his own burning with intensity. "This isn't just about making your ex jealous or giving you closure, at least not for me." The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, everything else fading into background noise. Maya had known, on some level, that their relationship had shifted beyond professional boundaries. But hearing Victor acknowledge it, seeing the vulnerability in his expression, made it devastatingly real. "What is it about, then?" she whispered. Instead of answering with words, Victor cupped her face in both hands and kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative or questioning. It was absolute, a claiming and a promise and a revelation all at once. Maya's hands fisted in his jacket as she rose onto her toes, matching his intensity, pouring 2 years of suppressed longing into the contact. He tasted like whiskey and danger and something uniquely him, and Maya had never wanted anything more in her entire life. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom had erupted in whispers. Maya didn't care. Victor's forehead rested against hers, his breathing uneven, his eyes closed as though he was trying to memorize the moment. "That's what this is about," he said roughly. "That's what it's been about for months, if I'm being honest." Maya should have been afraid. Victor DeLuca wasn't a safe choice. He was violence wrapped in expensive suits, power that could destroy as easily as protect. A life that existed in shadows most people pretended didn't exist. But fear felt distant and irrelevant compared to the rightness of being in his arms. Then I should probably tell you, she said, her voice surprisingly steady, that I'm not interested in safe anymore. I'm interested in real. And this, she pressed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. This feels realer than anything I've ever known. Victor's smile was beautiful and terrifying and completely unguarded. Then let's get out of here, because I'm done sharing you with this room full of parasites. He didn't wait for her response, simply took her hand and led her off the dance floor. They moved through the crowd like royalty, people partying without being asked, curiosity and speculation following in their wake. Maya caught sight of the gossip columnist furiously typing on her phone, several board members conferring in urgent whispers, and somewhere near the bar, a space where Ethan had been standing now empty. The valet brought Victor's car around, a sleek black Mercedes that purred like a satisfied predator. He held the door for Maya with old-fashioned courtesy, then slid behind the wheel with the kind of comfort that came from years of practice. "Where are we going?" Maya asked as they pulled away from the Fontainebleau, leaving the gala and its gossip and her entire past behind. Victor's hand found hers across the center console, threading their fingers together. "Somewhere we can talk without an audience. Somewhere you can decide if this is really what you want." "I already know what I want." "Maya." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not Ethan Rowe. I won't diminish you or try to make you smaller. But I'm also not a normal man leading a normal life. The things I'm involved in, the enemies I've made, the choices I've had to make to build what I have, they're not glamorous or romantic. They're dangerous. And if you choose this, if you choose me, you need to understand exactly what you're accepting." The warning should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first completely honest thing anyone had said to her in years. Victor wasn't offering her a fairy tale. He was offering her truth, consequences, and a choice made with full awareness. "Tell me," Maya said simply. "Tell me everything, and then I'll decide." Victor's smile was small but genuine. "That's my girl." He drove them to a penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay. His home, Maya realized with a start. She'd been to his office countless times, had accompanied him to restaurants and meetings, and even his tailor, but he'd never brought her here. This was his sanctuary, the one place he could be completely himself without the performance required by the outside world. The apartment was beautiful in an understated way. Clean lines, expensive but comfortable furniture, walls of windows that made the city feel like it was spreading itself at his feet. But what caught Maya's attention was the art. Photographs mostly, black and white images of Miami's forgotten corners. Street kids playing in fire hydrant spray. An elderly woman feeding pigeons in Bayfront Park. A young man asleep on a bench, his face peaceful despite circumstance. "You took these," Maya said, not a question. "Years ago. Before everything else." Victor moved to the windows, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders tight. "I wanted to document beauty in unexpected places. Prove that worth wasn't determined by wealth or power or social standing." Maya joined him at the window, close enough that their arms brushed. "You still believe that?" "Most days." He turned to face her, and in the dim lighting, he looked younger and older at the same time. A man carrying weight that would have crushed someone weaker. "Maya, my father died when I was 16, killed by men who wanted our neighborhood for development. My mother tried to hold everything together, but she was one woman against a machine designed to destroy people like us." He paused, and Maya waited, understanding that this was confession and catharsis and trust all woven together. "I made choices," Victor continued, "aligned myself with people who could protect what mattered, learned skills that nice boys from good families don't learn, built power the only way available to me. And by the time I realized I'd become something other than what I'd intended, I was too deep to walk away." "What are you, Victor?" Maya asked softly. "Really?" "A criminal, by most legal definitions. A businessman, by others. A necessary evil, according to people who benefit from my existence but would never acknowledge me publicly." His jaw tightened. "I'm a man who's done terrible things for what I believed were good reasons, and I'm someone who would do them again if it meant protecting the people I love." The confession hung between them, honest and brutal and entirely without justification or excuse. Victor wasn't asking for forgiveness or understanding. He was simply presenting the truth and letting Maya decide what to do with it. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, the one who'd let Ethan shape her into something apologetic and small. That woman would have run, would have convinced herself that safety mattered more than passion, that normal was preferable to extraordinary, that she should settle for less rather than risk everything for more. But that woman had died the day Maya walked away from Ethan Rowe. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer, more honest about who she was and what she wanted. "I have conditions," Maya said finally. Victor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Conditions?" "If I'm going to do this, really do this, I need honesty, complete honesty. Don't protect me from the truth because you think I'm too fragile to handle it. Don't make decisions about my safety without consulting me. And don't ever treat me like I'm something to be managed rather than an equal partner." Something shifted in Victor's expression, surprise perhaps, followed by a respect so profound it made Maya's breath catch. "I can do that," he said quietly. "Though I should warn you, my instinct is to protect. I'll have to consciously fight against wrapping you in cotton and keeping you away from anything dangerous." "Then fight against it, because I didn't survive Ethan Rowe and rebuild myself from nothing just to become someone's protected asset." Maya stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I want partnership, Victor. Real partnership. The kind where we're honest even when it's hard, where we trust each other to handle difficult truths, where we face things together instead of you facing them alone to spare me." Victor's hands came up to frame her face, his touch reverent. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" "I'm learning." Maya smiled slightly. "You've been an excellent teacher." "Maya Collins." Victor's thumb traced her lower lip, his eyes dark with want and wonder. "Would you allow me the honor of courting you properly? Dinner, conversations, gradually building something real instead of just colliding into each other because of your ex's arrogance?" The formal phrasing should have seemed ridiculous. Instead, it felt exactly right. Victor DeLuca asking permission instead of taking, offering choice instead of assumption. "Yes," Maya said simply. "Though I should warn you, I'm going to be a demanding partner." "Good." Victor's smile was brilliant and genuine and completely unguarded. "I wouldn't want you any other way." He kissed her again, slower this time, exploring rather than claiming. Maya let herself sink into it, into him, into the terrifying and exhilarating reality of choosing danger over diminishment, passion over safety, a man who saw her completely and wanted her anyway. When they finally broke apart, Victor kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Stay tonight, not for anything except company. I want to fall asleep knowing you're safe and wake up with you still here." "That's surprisingly domestic for a dangerous criminal," Maya teased gently. "I contain multitudes." Victor's eyes sparkled with humor. "Also, I make excellent coffee." Maya laughed, real, genuine laughter that felt like freedom. "Then how can I refuse?" They spent the rest of the night talking. Victor told her about his mother, who'd passed 5 years ago, but whose recipes he still cooked when he needed to feel grounded. Maya shared her own history, a middle-class upbringing in Atlanta, parents who'd retired to Arizona, a journalism degree she'd never used because she'd fallen into executive assistance by accident and discovered she loved the organized chaos of keeping powerful people functional. As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, they sat on Victor's balcony wrapped in a shared blanket, watching Miami wake up beneath them. Victor's arm was solid around Maya's shoulders, her head resting against his chest, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Maya felt completely at peace. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Victor said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We take this one day at a time. We build something real, and we deal with whatever comes together. Even when it's dangerous? Especially when it's dangerous." His arm tightened around her. "Because you're right. I need an equal partner, not someone to protect. I've been alone at the top for too long. It's made me harder than I needed to be." Maya smiled against his chest. "Then I guess it's good I showed up when I did." "The best timing imaginable," Victor agreed. "Though I should probably mention that tomorrow's gossip columns are going to have a field day with our very public display at the gala." "Let them talk." Maya felt fierce satisfaction at the thought. Let everyone talk. Let Ethan Rose see every headline and know exactly what he lost. Victor's laugh rumbled through his chest, warming Maya from the inside out. Ruthless and beautiful. How did I get so lucky? You hired an excellent executive assistant, Maya said primly, one who refuses to be anything less than she deserves. That you did. That I did. Victor stood, pulling Maya up with him. Come on. I promised you excellent coffee, and I'm a man of my word. As they headed inside, leaving the sunrise behind, Maya caught her reflection in the glass. A woman transformed not by a man's love, but by her own refusal to accept anything less than she deserved. The woman staring back at her was strong, clear-eyed, and ready for whatever came next. Behind her, Victor moved around the kitchen with easy competence, humming something under his breath. And Maya realized that this quiet domestic moment with a dangerous man making coffee as the city woke around them felt more real than anything she'd experienced in her previous life. She'd walked into that gala expecting closure. What she'd found instead was a beginning. The coffee was as excellent as Victor had promised, dark, rich, and served in delicate porcelain cups that seemed absurdly civilized for a man who'd threatened to dismantle a family empire just hours earlier. Maya sat curled in the corner of his leather sofa, watching Miami's early morning traffic begin its daily crawl through the streets below, feeling the pleasant exhaustion that came from staying up all night talking about things that mattered. Victor emerged from his bedroom dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, his hair still damp from the shower. Even in this casual state, he carried himself with the kind of controlled power that made every movement seem deliberate. He paused when he saw Maya, something unguarded flashing across his features before his usual composure settled back into place. I have a conference call in an hour, he said, though he made no move toward his office. You're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. Or I can have my driver take you home. Maya set down her coffee cup with careful precision. What would you prefer? Honestly? Victor crossed to the sofa, sitting close enough that their knees touched. I'd prefer you stay forever. But that's probably too much honesty for our first official morning together. Despite everything they'd shared through the night, the confessions, the kisses, the careful building of something new, Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks. You don't believe in taking things slow, do you? I believe in being honest about what I want while respecting your pace. Victor's hand found hers, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. I've waited a long time for someone like you, Maya. I can wait longer if that's what you need. The words settled into Maya's chest, warm and solid. Before she could respond, Victor's phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table. He glanced at the screen and something dark crossed his features. Problem? Maya asked. Potentially. Victor's jaw tightened as he read the message. It seems our display at the gala has attracted more attention than anticipated. My associates are concerned about the exposure. Maya's stomach tightened. Your associates. The people I work with, the ones who prefer I maintain a low profile and don't give gossip columnists ammunition. Victor set the phone down with controlled force. They're suggesting we, and I'm quoting here, contain the situation before it becomes a liability. Meaning they want you to distance yourself from me. Maya kept her voice level despite the familiar ache of inadequacy trying to resurface. Because I'm not discreet enough. Not appropriate enough. Not... Maya. Victor's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Stop. Whatever you're about to say, whatever old wounds are trying to reopen, stop. This is not about your worth. This is about men who've forgotten that I don't take orders from anyone. But if being with me creates problems for you, then we'll handle the problems together. Victor's voice was absolute. I told you last night. I want a partner, not a secret. If my associates can't accept that, they can find someone else to do business with. Maya searched his face for doubt or resentment and found only fierce certainty. You'd really risk your business relationships over this? Over me? Over us, Victor corrected. And yes, without hesitation. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle despite the steel in his voice. But I should warn you, they're going to push back. There will be pressure, possibly threats, definitely attempts to make you feel like you're not worth the trouble. Can you handle that? Maya thought about Ethan's subtle erosions of her confidence, the 1,000 small cuts that had nearly bled her dry. She thought about rebuilding herself piece by piece, learning to value her own judgment, discovering strength she hadn't known she possessed. And she thought about last night, standing beside Victor as an equal, watching her ex-boyfriend crumble before the truth of who she'd become. "I can handle it," she said firmly, "as long as you don't shut me out when things get difficult. As long as you let me stand beside you instead of behind you." Victor's smile was proud and slightly fierce. "Deal. Though you should probably know that standing beside me means you'll meet some of these people eventually. My world isn't just business meetings and charity galas." "Show me," Maya said before she could second-guess herself. "Not today, but soon. I want to understand all of it, the parts you show the world and the parts you keep hidden. No more illusions." Something shifted in Victor's expression. Relief, maybe, or the bone-deep satisfaction of being truly seen. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," Maya admitted. "But I'm sure." Victor pulled her close, and Maya let herself sink into his solid warmth, breathing in the scent of his cologne and coffee and something uniquely him. They stayed like that for several heartbeats before his phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. "I need to take this," Victor said reluctantly. "It's Lorenzo, my second in command. He won't stop calling until I answer." Maya nodded, extracting herself from his embrace. "I should probably go home anyway, change clothes, feed my cat, pretend I have a normal life." "You have a cat?" Victor's eyebrows rose. "How did I not know this?" "You never asked about my personal life beyond work." Maya's lips curved. "Her name is Athena. She's extremely judgmental and barely tolerates my existence." "I like her already." Victor stood, helping Maya to her feet with automatic courtesy. "Let me have Marco drive you. I'll feel better knowing you got home safely." Maya started to protest, then remembered their agreement about honesty. "That feels a bit overprotective, but I appreciate the concern. How about I take an Uber and text you when I'm home?" Victor considered this, clearly wrestling with his instinct to control every variable. Finally, he nodded. "That works? Though I'm still getting you a proper security detail." "Victor, not negotiable," he said firmly. "You're important to me now. That makes you a potential target for people who'd want leverage against me. I need to know you're protected." The reality of his world settled over Maya like a weighted blanket, not entirely unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. "Okay, but we discussed the details together. I won't have strangers following me around without understanding exactly what the threats are." "Fair enough." Victor walked her to the door, his hand finding the small of her back in that possessive gesture she was beginning to crave. "Dinner tonight? Somewhere quiet where we can actually talk?" "I'd like that." Maya rose on her toes, pressing a quick kiss to his jaw. "Try not to threaten anyone's livelihood before noon." Victor's laugh followed her into the elevator, warm and genuine. As the doors closed, Maya caught one last glimpse of him standing in his doorway, watching her leave with an expression that made her heart stutter. The ride home gave Maya time to process everything that had happened in less than 12 hours. She'd confronted her ex-boyfriend, been publicly claimed by one of Miami's most dangerous men, spent the night learning the truth about Victor's world, and somehow emerged feeling more certain about her choices than she had in years. It should have felt reckless or insane. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing she'd done since leaving Ethan. Her apartment building was modest compared to Victor's penthouse. A tidy mid-rise in Coral Gables with palm trees out front and a doorman who knew everyone's names. Maya had chosen it specifically because it felt like hers, earned through her own work, not dependent on anyone else's approval or support. Athena greeted her with typical feline disdain, meowing accusingly about the late breakfast before deigning to accept affection. Maya went through her morning routine on autopilot, feeding the cat, showering, changing into jeans and a soft sweater that felt beautifully ordinary after last night's formal gown. She was halfway through her second cup of coffee when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Maya Collins," she answered automatically, slipping into her professional voice. "Ms. Collins, my name is Thomas Rivera. I'm an attorney representing the Rowe family interests." The voice was smooth, practiced, and entirely unwelcome. "I'm calling regarding last night's incident at the Coastal Conservation Gala. Maya's hand tightened on her phone. Incident is an interesting word for Ethan Rowe publicly insulting me. Mr. Rowe's family is concerned about the potential for negative publicity arising from the confrontation. We'd like to offer you a settlement in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement regarding your relationship with Mr. Rowe and the events of last evening. The casual arrogance of it stole Maya's breath. They were trying to buy her silence, to reduce her to a problem that could be solved with money and legal documents. How much? She heard herself ask, curious despite her anger. $50,000 provided you sign within the next 48 hours and agree not to discuss Mr. Rowe with the media or in any public forum. Maya laughed, sharp and bitter. Tell the Rowe family that my silence isn't for sale. And tell Ethan that if he's so concerned about negative publicity, he should try being less of a condescending ass in public. Ms. Collins, I'd strongly advise you to reconsider. I'm done reconsidering things to make men comfortable, Maya interrupted. Goodbye, Mr. Rivera. She ended the call with more force than necessary, her heart pounding with righteous fury. The phone rang again immediately, and Maya was about to decline when she saw Victor's name on the screen. Did the Rowe family just try to buy your silence? Victor's voice was dangerously calm. How did you? Maya started, then understood. You had my phone monitored. I had certain precautions put in place after you left this morning, Victor said, not quite apologizing. Standard security protocols for anyone in my life. But we can discuss boundaries around privacy later. Right now, I need to know exactly what Thomas Rivera said to you. Maya repeated the conversation, watching Athena groom herself with elaborate disinterest. When she finished, Victor's silence was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. Victor? She prompted carefully. I'm debating whether to have Rivera disbarred or simply make it impossible for the Rowe family to find legal representation in South Florida. His tone suggested he was genuinely weighing the options. What did you say to them? That my silence isn't for sale, and Ethan should try being less of an ass. Maya paused. Was that the wrong response? That was perfect. Victor's approval was tangible even through the phone. Though you've just made yourself more of a target, the Rows don't handle rejection well. Neither do I, apparently. Maya sank onto her sofa, suddenly exhausted. Victor, is this what my life is going to be like now? Legal threats and security protocols and people trying to leverage me against you? In the short term, yes. Victor didn't sugarcoat it. The Rows are minor players, but they have enough influence to be annoying, and my associates' concerns about our relationship are going to manifest in various forms of pressure. But Maya, his voice softened, none of this is about you being inadequate or inappropriate. It's about powerful people being uncomfortable with variables they can't control. I'm a variable? You're a revelation, Victor corrected, one that's going to force everyone around me to adjust their expectations. Change is painful for people invested in the status quo. Maya absorbed this, understanding the larger picture he was painting. You're saying that being with you means constantly fighting to prove I belong. I'm saying that being with me means standing firm while other people learn to accept what I already know, that you belong exactly where you choose to be. Victor paused. If that's too much, if you want to step back before this gets more complicated, I'll understand. But I need you to decide now, Maya. Once we're fully committed, once my world understands you're mine, there's no graceful exit. The warning was clear and honest, exactly what Maya had asked for. Victor was giving her one last chance to choose safety over chaos, predictability over passion, a normal life over whatever dangerous, beautiful thing they were building together. Maya thought about the woman she'd been with Ethan, apologetic, diminished, constantly seeking approval she'd never quite earn. She thought about the woman she'd become, strong enough to walk away, clear enough to demand respect, brave enough to want something extraordinary even if it came with extraordinary risks. I'm not stepping back, she said firmly, but I need to understand the threats I'm facing. No more vague warnings or security protocols I don't comprehend. If someone's going to come after me, I want to know who they are and what they're capable of. Tonight, Victor promised. Dinner at my place. I'll introduce you to Lorenzo and explain exactly how my organization works. Full transparency, even the parts that might frighten you. Especially those parts, Maya corrected. I need to see all of it. After they ended the call, Maya sat in her quiet apartment with Athena purring on her lap, contemplating the magnitude of what she'd just committed to. In romance novels, this was the moment where the heroine would have doubts, where well-meaning friends would warn her away from the dangerous man. But Maya's closest friend was her sister in Phoenix, and their relationship had always been more competitive than supportive. And the truth was, Maya didn't want to be talked out of this. She wanted Victor, his intensity, his honesty, his willingness to give her choice and agency even when it conflicted with his protective instincts. She wanted the version of herself that existed beside him, fierce and uncompromising and absolutely certain of her worth. The afternoon passed in strange domesticity. Maya caught up on laundry, answered work emails. Victor's actual business operation still required her attention, and tried not to obsess over what the evening would bring. Around 4, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Miss Collins, this is Marco, Mr. DeLuca's driver. I'll be collecting you at 6:30 for dinner. Please let me know if you need a different time." Maya smiled despite herself. Victor was clearly taking no chances with her safety, even for a simple dinner. She confirmed the time and went to find something to wear that said, "Meeting my boyfriend's criminal associates," without actually being that specific. She settled on black slacks and a silk blouse the color of Merlot, professional enough to be taken seriously, elegant enough to signal she belonged. When Marco arrived precisely at 6:30, he was everything Maya had expected, mid-40s, compact and dangerous-looking despite his courteous demeanor, and clearly someone who'd done more than just drive cars in his career. "Mr. DeLuca wanted me to assure you that tonight is just conversation," Marco said as they pulled into traffic. "No one will pressure you or make you uncomfortable." He was very specific about that. "Has he been micromanaging the entire evening?" Maya asked with amusement. Marco's lips quirked. "He cares about you, makes him careful in ways I haven't seen before. It's good for him." The observation was simple but profound. Maya wondered what Victor had been like before. How isolated, how guarded, how alone at the top of his dangerous empire. The thought made something tender unfold in her chest. Victor's penthouse looked different in the evening light. Warmer, more inviting, lived in rather than just elegant. He met her at the door, dressed casually in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes seem impossibly dark. The kiss he pressed to her lips was thorough and welcoming, tinged with relief as though he'd been worried she might change her mind. "You look beautiful," he murmured against her mouth. "Though you could have worn anything, and I'd still think so." "Careful," Maya teased. "You're going to ruin your reputation as a fearsome criminal mastermind." "Around you, I'm finding I don't care much about my reputation." Victor kept one arm around her waist as he led her inside. "Lorenzo's in the study. Are you ready for this?" Maya took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and nodded. "Show me your world." The study was all dark wood and leather, lined with books that actually looked read rather than decorative. The man standing by the window turned as they entered, and Maya found herself face to face with someone who radiated the same controlled danger as Victor, but in an entirely different package. Lorenzo Ricci was perhaps 35, tall and lean, with the kind of handsome face that belonged on cologne ads, if not for the scar bisecting his left eyebrow and the predatory intelligence in his pale eyes. "Miss Collins," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying a faint Italian accent. "Victor's told me a great deal about you." "All good, I hope," Maya replied, maintaining eye contact despite the assessment in his gaze. Lorenzo's smile was sharp. "He said you were direct. I appreciate that in a person." He glanced at Victor. "You're sure about this? Once we brief her, there's no putting the information back in the box." "I'm sure," Victor said firmly, his hand steady on Maya's back. "She deserves to understand what she's choosing." They settled into the leather chairs positioned around a low table. Victor poured amber liquid into 3 glasses. Whiskey, Maya assumed, though she didn't drink hers immediately. Lorenzo did the talking, his words precise and unemotional as he laid out the structure of Victor's organization. It was more complex and far-reaching than Maya had imagined. Legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction companies, import/export operations, layered over less legal enterprises, money laundering through carefully structured transactions, protection rackets that actually provided protection, Strategic violence used sparingly but effectively. Political connections maintained through donations and favors. A network of loyalty built on fair treatment and brutal consequences for betrayal. "We're not the Mafia," Lorenzo said with slight amusement. "Despite what the gossip columns probably say, we're businessmen who operate in spaces the law has made inaccessible to traditional commerce. We fill needs the system refuses to acknowledge." "And the violence?" Maya asked steadily. "The threats? The people who disappear when they cross you?" Victor answered this time, his voice level. "We protect our own and eliminate threats. Not indiscriminately, not for pleasure, but with absolute certainty when necessary. I won't pretend we're heroes, Maya. We're survivors who've built power in a world that tried to crush us." Maya sipped her whiskey, letting the burn steady her nerves. "Who are your enemies? Who might come after me to get to you?" Lorenzo and Victor exchanged glances before Lorenzo pulled out a tablet, bringing up photographs and dossiers. He walked Maya through the landscape of Miami's criminal underworld, rival organizations, corrupt officials who'd become unpredictable, business interests that conflicted with Victor's territories. Each threat was explained clearly, along with existing precautions and potential vulnerabilities. "The most immediate concern is Rafael Vega," Lorenzo said, pulling up a photo of a handsome man in his early 50s. "He runs the port operations we've been trying to acquire. Having you publicly connected to Victor gives him leverage he didn't have before." "What kind of leverage?" Maya asked. "The kind where he might try to use you to negotiate better terms," Victor said grimly. "Or worse, try to hurt me, which is why you'll have protection starting tomorrow. 2 bodyguards in rotation, surveillance on your apartment and workplace, tracking on your phone and car." Maya's instinct was to bristle at the loss of privacy, but she forced herself to think strategically. "What would you do if someone did manage to take me? What would your response be?" The silence that followed was arctic. Lorenzo's expression went carefully blank while Victor's face became something carved from stone. "I would burn the world," Victor said quietly. "I would make whoever touched you regret every choice that led to that moment. And then I would make sure no one ever considered you a viable target again." The words should have been horrifying. Instead, they settled into Maya's bones as absolute truth, not a threat, but a promise, delivered with the certainty of someone who'd followed through on similar vows before. "Then make sure your enemies know that," Maya said steadily. "Make sure Rafael Vega and anyone else considering using me as leverage understands exactly what they'd be unleashing, because I refuse to be afraid in my own life." Lorenzo actually smiled, genuine approval rather than polite performance. "Victor, you found yourself a partner with a spine. Don't screw this up." "I'm trying not to," Victor said wryly. He turned to Maya, his expression softer. "Are you sure about this? We can still arrange protection without you being publicly connected to me. You could maintain distance, stay safe." I could also live in a bubble and never take risks," Maya countered. "But that's not living, Victor. That's just existing while you wait to die." She set down her whiskey glass with deliberate precision. "I want the full partnership you offered. That means accepting the risks along with everything else." Victor pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers in a gesture that had become theirs. "You're braver than you know." "I learned from someone who refuses to be diminished by circumstances," Maya said softly. "He's taught me that power comes from choosing your battles and standing firm in your choices." Lorenzo cleared his throat delicately. "As touching as this is, we should discuss practical matters. Maya, you'll meet your security team tomorrow. They're professionals, former military, completely trustworthy. They'll be obvious enough to deter opportunistic threats, but subtle enough that you won't feel constantly monitored." They spent the next hour going over protocols and procedures. Maya asked questions, raised concerns about maintaining some privacy, and negotiated boundaries around when and how she'd be protected. Lorenzo proved surprisingly willing to accommodate her requests, and Maya realized Victor must have instructed him to treat her input seriously. When Lorenzo finally left, promising to have everything arranged by morning, Maya found herself alone with Victor in his penthouse office. The city glittered beyond the windows, beautiful and dangerous and full of possibilities. "How are you feeling?" Victor asked, pulling her into his arms. Maya leaned into his solid warmth, processing everything she'd learned. "Overwhelmed, frightened, strangely exhilarated. She pulled back to meet his eyes, and absolutely certain I made the right choice. Even knowing what my world involves, what you're risking by being with me? Especially knowing that, Maya said firmly. Because you gave me the choice, Victor. You didn't hide the truth or try to protect me from reality. You trusted me to understand and decide for myself. That's worth more than safety. Victor's kiss was deep and claiming, his hand sliding into her hair as he pulled her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes burned with something that looked like wonder. "Stay," he said roughly. "Not because it's safer here, but because I don't want you to leave." Maya smiled, feeling powerful and desired and absolutely certain. "I thought you'd never ask." They moved to the kitchen where Victor cooked. Actual cooking, not ordering from his usual restaurants. Maya perched on the counter, sipping wine and watching him move with surprising competence around the stove. "My mother's recipe," he explained, stirring something that smelled amazing. She believed food was love made tangible, that feeding someone properly was the most basic form of caring. "Tell me about her," Maya said softly. Victor's hand stilled briefly before resuming their work. "She was fierce, survived losing my father, kept our family together through poverty and violence, and systems designed to break people like us. She taught me that honor matters more than law, that loyalty is currency, that protecting your own is the highest calling." He paused, his jaw tight. "She also taught me to cook, to read poetry, to find beauty in unexpected places. She wanted me to be strong and gentle. I'm not sure I managed both." "You did," Maya said with certainty. "You're the most gently violent person I've ever met." Victor's laugh was surprised and genuine. "That might be the strangest compliment I've received." They ate at his dining table, the city spread beneath them like scattered jewels. The conversation flowed easily. Work projects Maya was managing, territorial disputes Lorenzo was navigating, a new restaurant they wanted to try together. It felt simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary, like playing house at the edge of a volcano. After dinner, they moved to the sofa, Maya tucked against Victor's side as they half-watched a documentary neither of them cared about. His hand traced patterns on her shoulder, her fingers played with his free hand, and the silence between them was comfortable rather than strained. "I should tell you something," Victor said eventually, "about why I'm so protective." Maya turned to look at him, seeing the tension in his jaw. "You don't have to." "I want to." Victor's eyes were distant, focused on something only he could see. 10 years ago, I was in a relationship. Her name was Isabella. She was smart, beautiful, completely unconnected to my world. I thought I could keep those parts of my life separate, have something pure that existed outside the violence and consequences. Maya's stomach tightened, understanding where this was going. "One of my enemies found out about her," Victor continued, his voice flat. "Used her to try to force my hand in a territorial dispute. I got her back, but not before—" He stopped, his jaw working. "She survived. Physically. But she couldn't forgive me for dragging her into that world, for not being honest about the dangers from the start. She left, and I couldn't blame her." "Victor," Maya breathed, her hand finding his face. "I swore I'd never do that again," he said, finally meeting her eyes. "Never involve someone I cared about in this life. For 10 years I've kept everyone at a distance. And then you walked into my office with your ridiculous competence and your quiet strength, and every defense I'd built just crumbled." Maya understood now why he'd been so insistent on honesty, on giving her full information before she committed. He wasn't just being ethical, he was exercising old guilt, refusing to repeat past mistakes. "I'm not Isabella," Maya said firmly. "I'm choosing this with full awareness of what it means. And if something happens, if someone does try to use me as leverage, I won't blame you for being who you are. I'll blame them for being stupid enough to make you their enemy." Victor's smile was pained and proud at once. "You say that now. But if you're ever actually in danger because of me, then we'll handle it together," Maya interrupted. "That's what partners do, Victor. They face consequences as a team, not as martyrs taking separate blame." She shifted to straddle his lap, forcing him to look directly at her. "I'm not going to spend our relationship waiting for you to push me away because you're afraid of repeating history. Either trust that I know my own mind, or we stop this now before we both get hurt." The ultimatum hung between them, clear and uncompromising. Victor's hands came to rest on her hips, his grip tight enough to leave marks. "I trust you," he said finally, roughly. "I trust your strength and your judgment and your ability to handle whatever comes. What I don't trust is my ability to survive losing you." "Then don't lose me," Maya said simply. "Choose me every day. Fight for us. Let me stand beside you instead of trying to shield me from every threat." She leaned forward, her lips brushing his. "And trust that I'm strong enough to stand there." Victor's control shattered. He kissed her like a man drowning, his hands pulling her impossibly closer as she matched his intensity. They tumbled onto the sofa, Maya pinned beneath Victor's weight, both of them gasping for air and sanity, and some way to get closer than physically possible. "Stay," Victor demanded between kisses. "Not just tonight. Move in here where I can keep you safe, where I can wake up with you every morning and know you're protected." Maya pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Ask me again in a month, when we've had time to build this properly, instead of rushing because we're terrified of losing each other." Victor groaned but nodded, recognizing wisdom even through want. "1 month, and then I'm asking again with significantly more persuasive arguments." "I look forward to it," Maya said with a smile that was probably too smug. They stayed tangled together on the sofa until exhaustion finally claimed them both. Victor carried Maya to his bedroom, the same one she'd borrowed clothes from that morning, and they fell asleep wrapped around each other, fully clothed and completely content. When Maya woke to Miami sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, Victor was already awake, watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "Good morning," she murmured. "The best morning," Victor corrected, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Ready to meet your security team?" Maya groaned but nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be." What she wasn't ready for was the reality waiting outside Victor's protective sphere, a reality that would test everything they'd built and force Maya to discover exactly how strong she'd become. The security team arrived at Victor's penthouse exactly at 9. 2 individuals who managed to look both professional and vaguely terrifying. The woman introduced herself as Sarah Chen, late 30s with sharp eyes and a handshake that could crack walnuts. Her partner was James Rodriguez, a wall of muscle wrapped in an expensive suit who spoke in careful, measured sentences that suggested military training and zero tolerance for nonsense. Maya sat in Victor's living room feeling absurdly like she was interviewing bodyguards for a movie role rather than her actual life. Victor stood behind her chair, one hand resting possessively on her shoulder, as Sarah laid out their proposed security protocols. "We'll maintain distance when possible," Sarah explained, her tone matter-of-fact. "You'll barely notice us most days, but when threat levels increase, we tighten the perimeter. Mr. DeLuca has given us access to intelligence reports and will adjust coverage based on current risks." "What constitutes a threat level increase?" Maya asked, channeling the competence that had made her invaluable to Victor professionally. James pulled out a tablet, showing her a color-coded system that would have seemed paranoid if she hadn't spent last night learning exactly who might want to use her as leverage. Green meant normal operations, yellow indicated potential concerns, orange required heightened awareness, and red meant immediate danger requiring extraction protocols. "We're currently at yellow," Sarah said calmly. "Rafael Vega's people have been asking questions about you. Nothing actionable yet, but enough to warrant caution." Maya felt Victor's hand tighten on her shoulder. She reached up to cover his fingers with hers, silently reminding him of their agreement. Partners, not protector and protected. "What kind of questions?" Maya asked. "Your routine. Where you live, where you shop, your usual routes to work. Standard reconnaissance for someone planning either an approach or an operation." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she understood exactly how unsettling this information was. "We've already arranged counter-surveillance. Anyone watching you is being watched in return." The chess game of it all made Maya's head spin. She was a piece on a board she'd never asked to play on, valuable only because of her connection to Victor. The thought should have made her angry or afraid. Instead, it crystallized something in her mind. She refused to be a passive asset. If she was going to be part of this world, she needed to understand how to move through it with agency. "Teach me," Maya said abruptly. Three sets of eyes fixed on her with varying degrees of confusion. Victor's hand stilled on her shoulder. Teach you what exactly? Sarah asked carefully. How to protect myself. How to recognize threats. How to be an asset instead of a liability. Maya straightened in her chair, channeling every ounce of determination she possessed. I won't live my life as someone who needs constant protection. I want to be someone who can handle danger when it comes. James and Sarah looked to Victor, clearly waiting for his response. Maya watched his face in profile, seeing the war between his protective instincts and his respect for her autonomy play out in the tension of his jaw. That's not a bad idea, Victor said finally, though the words sounded like they cost him something. Sarah, can you arrange self-defense training? And James, situational awareness protocols? Already planned it, Sarah said with the hint of a smile. Mr. DeLuca mentioned you'd probably request exactly this. We start tomorrow if you're available. Maya felt absurdly validated. Victor had anticipated her needs, respected them enough to have solutions ready, but still let her articulate the request herself. It was such a small thing, but it spoke volumes about how differently he saw her compared to how Ethan had. They spent another hour going over logistics. Maya would maintain her normal routine as much as possible. Work, home, the occasional coffee shop where she did her weekend reading. Sarah and James would rotate coverage, with additional personnel on standby for high-risk situations. Her apartment would get upgraded security, her car would be equipped with tracking and panic buttons, and she'd carry a phone that could alert the team instantly if she felt threatened. One more thing, James said as they prepared to leave. Mr. DeLuca requested we teach you how to handle firearms. Are you comfortable with that? Maya had never touched a gun in her life. The idea should have been foreign and frightening. Instead, she heard herself say, "When do we start?" After Sarah and James departed, Maya found herself alone with Victor in the sudden quiet of his penthouse. He'd moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight with tension he was trying to hide. Say it, Maya prompted gently. Say what? Victor didn't turn around. Whatever you're thinking that's making you look like you want to lock me in a tower somewhere. Maya crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. We promised honesty, remember? Victor's hands covered hers, his grip almost painful. I'm terrified, absolutely terrified that something will happen to you because you're connected to me. And I'm angry at myself for being selfish enough to want you anyway. Victor, let me finish. He turned in her arms, his eyes blazing with emotion he usually kept carefully controlled. You're talking about learning to shoot, to fight, to navigate a world that's broken people stronger than you. And part of me is proud because you refuse to be a victim. But another part, the part that remembers finding Isabella bleeding in a warehouse, that part wants to send you somewhere safe and isolated where nothing can touch you. Maya reached up to cup his face, forcing him to focus on her rather than his ghosts. I'm not Isabella. And you're not the man you were 10 years ago. We're building something different, Victor. Something based on truth and choice and partnership. But that only works if you let me be a full partner, even when it scares you. It does scare me, Victor admitted roughly. More than anything I've faced in my entire life. Good, Maya said firmly. Because if you weren't scared, I'd worry you didn't actually care. Fear means you have something to lose. Now you just have to decide if you trust me enough to let me help protect what we're building. Victor's laugh was pained and proud at once. You're going to be the death of me. Or the making of you, Maya countered. Either way, you're stuck with me now. They stood wrapped around each other as Miami woke up beneath them, two people choosing danger over safety because the alternative was living half a life. Eventually, Victor's phone buzzed with the insistent rhythm that meant business couldn't wait. He kissed Maya thoroughly before reluctantly extracting himself from her arms. I have meetings all day, he said with genuine regret. But Marco will take you home, and Sarah will be on duty starting this afternoon. Tomorrow we'll have dinner with some of my business associates, people you should know if you're going to be part of this world. Maya nodded, understanding that integration into Victor's life meant navigating social obligations as complex as any security protocol. What should I expect? Curiosity, mostly. Some skepticism. Definitely testing to see if you're a temporary distraction or something more permanent. Victor's smile was sharp. Show them the woman who put Ethan Rowe in his place. They'll respect strength and composure. No pressure then, Maya said wryly. You'll be magnificent. Victor kissed her again, lingering this time. You always are. Marco drove Maya home in companionable silence, though she noticed Sarah's car following at a discreet distance. Her apartment felt both familiar and strange after 2 nights at Victor's penthouse. Smaller, quieter, completely her own. Athena greeted her with typical feline disdain before demanding breakfast and attention in equal measure. Maya was halfway through responding to work emails when her phone rang with her sister's number. She considered ignoring it. Conversations with Jessica always left her feeling slightly inadequate, but guilt won out. Maya, finally! Jessica's voice was bright and sharp as cut glass. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Have you seen the gossip sites? Maya's stomach sank. What gossip sites? Oh, honey, you're everywhere. Mystery woman captures Miami's most eligible bachelor. Victor DeLuca's stunning date causes scandal at charity gala. There's even a photo of you two dancing that's getting shared like crazy. Jessica paused meaningfully. When were you going to mention you were dating a millionaire? He's not... Maya stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. Victor was wealthy, certainly, though his fortune came from sources her sister couldn't know about. It's complicated. It looks pretty uncomplicated from where I'm sitting. He's gorgeous, he's rich, and he's looking at you in these photos like you're the only person in the room. Jessica's tone shifted slightly. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Men like that don't usually date executive assistants. They date supermodels and socialites. The casual dismissal stung despite Maya's best efforts to ignore it. I'm his executive assistant professionally. What we are personally is different. I'm just saying, be careful. Remember what happened with Ethan? You thought he was serious too, and we both know how that ended. Jessica meant well. Probably. But her concern always came wrapped in subtle implications of Maya's inadequacy. Men at that level don't commit to women like us. They have fun with us and then marry someone from their own world. Jessica, I have to go, Maya said, her patience fraying. I appreciate the concern, but I'm handling my own life. Don't get defensive. I'm trying to protect you from getting hurt again. Jessica sighed dramatically. Just promise me you'll be smart about this. Get something in writing if things get serious. Protect yourself financially. Maya ended the call feeling exhausted and vaguely angry. Her sister's words echoed Ethan's old implications, that Maya wasn't quite enough, that she should be grateful for attention from powerful men rather than expecting genuine partnership. It was exactly the kind of thinking she'd worked so hard to unlearn. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victor. How's your sister? Maya smiled despite her frustration. He'd been monitoring her calls, invasive under normal circumstances, but oddly comforting given current security concerns. She typed back, worried I'm out of my league with you. Standard sibling anxiety wrapped in helpful concern. Victor's response was immediate. She's wrong. I'm the one out of my league. Tell her your boyfriend said so. Boyfriend. The label settled into Maya's chest, warm and solid. They hadn't officially defined what they were to each other, but seeing the word in Victor's text made something click into place. Maya spent the afternoon in determined normalcy, grocery shopping with Sarah maintaining invisible distance, cleaning her apartment, video calling her parents in Arizona who mercifully knew nothing about Miami gossip sites. Her mother talked about their garden. Her father complained about their homeowners association, and neither mentioned Maya's personal life beyond asking if she was eating properly. Their benign disinterest was strangely soothing after Jessica's invasive concern. That evening, Maya met Sarah at a discreet gym in Coral Gables for their first self-defense session. The space was clearly exclusive. No signs out front, security requiring keycard access, equipment that looked expensive and well-maintained. Sarah led her to a private training room with padded floors and mirrored walls. We'll start basic, Sarah said, moving to the center of the mat. Awareness first, technique second. Most people get hurt because they don't see danger coming, not because they can't fight. For the next 2 hours, Sarah walked Maya through threat recognition, reading body language, identifying aggressive intent, understanding attack patterns. She taught Maya how to break grips, where to strike for maximum impact, how to create distance and escape routes. The physical work was exhausting, but Maya pushed through, determined to be someone who could protect herself. "You're stronger than you think," Sarah said as they finished. "Most people freeze when grabbed. You fought through it. That instinct will save your life someday." Maya wiped sweat from her face, feeling simultaneously accomplished and aware of how much she still needed to learn. How long before I'm actually capable of defending myself? Against an untrained attacker? 3 months of regular practice. Against a professional? Years, and even then you'd need luck. Sarah's honesty was bracing, but that's not really the goal. The goal is making you a harder target, someone who fights back, creates problems, draws attention. Most attackers want easy victims. Be difficult, and they'll move on. The logic was sound, if depressing. Maya showered at the gym and drove home with Sarah's car following like a guardian shadow. Her muscles ached in ways that promised serious soreness tomorrow, but she felt more capable than she had that morning. Small victories. Victor called as she was settling into bed with Athena curled against her side. "How was training?" "Painful and empowering in equal measure," Maya admitted. "Sarah's terrifying." "She's the best. I stole her from a private security firm that protects diplomats." Victor's voice was warm with approval. "I'm proud of you for doing this, for choosing to be strong instead of protected." "I learned from someone who refuses to be anything but strong," Maya said softly. They talked for another hour about nothing important. Favorite books, worst movies they'd ever seen, childhood pets. Victor told her about the stray dog he'd adopted at 12, how it had followed him everywhere until it died of old age. Maya shared stories about her college roommate, the disastrous semester she'd tried to major in journalism before discovering her gift for organization. "I miss you," Victor said eventually, the admission quiet but absolute. "I'm literally planning to see you tomorrow night," Maya pointed out, though warmth bloomed in her chest. "I know, I still miss you." He paused. "Is that too much? Too fast?" Maya thought about her sister's warnings, about conventional wisdom that suggested she should be more cautious. Then she thought about how right it felt to wake up in Victor's arms, how natural his presence had become in such a short time. "It's not too much," she said firmly. "It's honest. And I miss you too." After they hung up, Maya lay in the dark thinking about how completely her life had transformed in less than a week. She'd gone from quietly rebuilding herself after Ethan to standing at the center of a dangerous man's world, learning to shoot and fight and navigate criminal politics. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like finally becoming the person she was always meant to be. The next evening, Maya dressed for dinner with Victor's associates with the same care she'd given the gala. Armor disguised as elegance. She chose a navy dress that walked the line between sophisticated and understated, paired with heels that made her legs look endless and gave her enough height to meet most people's eyes without craning her neck. Her hair fell in soft waves. Her makeup was precise but natural, and when she studied her reflection, she saw someone who belonged exactly where she was choosing to be. Marco collected her at 7, and this time James rode in the passenger seat, his presence a reminder that they were entering territory that required extra caution. The restaurant was in Coconut Grove, expensive and exclusive in the way that came from decades of reputation rather than flashy marketing. Victor waited outside, devastating in a charcoal suit, his eyes tracking her approach with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You look incredible," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though you could have worn anything." "We've established you're biased," Maya said with a smile. "How nervous should I be?" "These are people I trust," Victor said carefully. "But trust in my world is complicated. They'll test you, try to find weaknesses or angles. Just be yourself. That's more than enough." The private dining room held 6 people, all of whom looked up when Maya and Victor entered. Lorenzo she recognized, along with 2 men and 2 women who radiated the same controlled danger she associated with Victor's inner circle. Victor made introductions with easy authority. "Maya Collins, my partner. Maya, this is Antonio Rivera, who oversees our construction interests. His wife, Elena, manages our hospitality operations. Marcus Webb handles logistics, and Sofia Delgado runs our political connections." Partner. Not girlfriend, not date, but partner. A word that carried weight in this room. Maya shook hands, met eyes, returned appraising looks with calm assessment. She'd learned in corporate settings how to project confidence without arrogance, competence without aggression. The same skills applied here, just with higher stakes. They settled into dinner, conversation flowing around business topics that seemed innocuous until Maya recognized the coded language. Discussions about shipping schedules that were really about smuggling routes. References to construction delays that meant territorial disputes. Hospitality negotiations that involved protection payments and strategic partnerships. Maya listened more than she spoke, understanding that integration into this world meant learning its vocabulary and rhythms. But when Antonio asked her opinion on a zoning dispute affecting one of their legitimate restaurants, she offered strategic insight that made everyone pause. The city council is more concerned about neighborhood character than actual zoning law, Maya said thoughtfully. If you position the expansion as preserving cultural heritage, maybe partner with local artists, commit to hiring from the community, they'll have political cover to approve it. Antonio exchanged glances with Victor. That's not bad thinking. Where'd you learn Miami politics? I've been working for Victor for 18 months, Maya said with a slight smile. You absorbed things. Elena leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp with interest. Victor mentioned you handled the Morrison situation at the gala. That took nerve. Well, Maya recognized this test. Would she downplay her own role or claim credit where it was due? Victor created the opportunity. I just provided details that made his position stronger. That's what good partnerships look like. And putting your ex-boyfriend in his place? Sophia asked with amusement. Was that partnership too? That was personal satisfaction with strategic benefits, Maya admitted, earning genuine laughs around the table, though Victor's public support certainly made the moment more effective. The evening progressed with careful choreography, questions designed to assess her strength, loyalty, discretion. Maya answered honestly when she could, deflected gracefully when she couldn't, and maintained the composure that had made her invaluable to Victor professionally. She caught him watching her several times with expressions that ranged from pride to something darker and more possessive. Over dessert, Marcus addressed Victor directly. Raphael's people approached me yesterday. They want a meeting. The temperature in the room dropped perceptibly. Victor's hand found Maya's under the table, his grip tight. What kind of meeting? Victor asked, his voice dangerously calm. Diplomatic, supposedly. He wants to discuss mutually beneficial arrangements regarding recent developments. Marcus's tone suggested exactly what he thought of Raphael's diplomacy. He specifically mentioned Ms. Collins, said he understood you'd acquired new priorities that might make you more amenable to negotiation. Maya felt rage bloom hot and bright in her chest. She was being used as leverage before anyone had even touched her. The mere threat of her vulnerability being weaponized to manipulate Victor. Absolutely not, Victor said flatly. Raphael doesn't get to use Maya as a bargaining chip. We don't negotiate under those terms. Victor, Maya squeezed his hand, drawing his attention. What if we turned this around, used his assumptions against him? Every eye in the room fixed on her. Antonio looked intrigued, Lorenzo carefully neutral, while the others waited to see where this was going. Explain, Victor said, though his jaw remained tight. Raphael thinks I'm a vulnerability, a soft target that makes you easier to manipulate. What if we make him think he's right while setting a trap? Maya spoke carefully, working through the strategy as she articulated it. You take the meeting, seem concerned about my safety, maybe even appear to make concessions. Meanwhile, we use his attention on me to gather intelligence on his actual operations. Absolutely not, Victor repeated, though she heard Lorenzo make an interested sound. I'm not using you as bait. Not as bait, Maya corrected, as a strategic asset who understands the role she's playing. Raphael's going to come after your interests anyway, Victor. At least this way we control the narrative and gather information in the process. She has a point, Sophia said slowly. And it's exactly the kind of move Raphael wouldn't expect, using his own assumptions to blind him to the actual play. Victor's face was stone, his entire body rigid with rejection of the idea. Maya turned in her chair to face him fully, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You promised to let me be a partner. That means trusting me to take calculated risks. This isn't calculated, Victor said roughly. This is putting you directly in a dangerous man's crosshairs. I'm already there, Maya pointed out. The question is whether we're reactive or proactive, and I'm tired of being reactive in my own life. She watched him wrestle with it, his protective instincts warring with his respect for her agency, his fear battling his strategic mind. Finally, he turned to Lorenzo. Could we actually make this work? Keep her safe while using Raphael's attention for intelligence gathering? Lorenzo considered carefully. If we planned it properly, increased security, made sure every interaction was controlled and monitored, possibly, but the risks would be significant. Then we mitigate the risks, Maya said firmly. You taught me that's what competent people do, assess danger and develop strategies to handle it. I'm not asking to go into this blind or unprotected. I'm asking to be part of the solution instead of just the problem. The discussion continued for another hour, everyone contributing ideas and identifying vulnerabilities. By the time they'd worked through a preliminary plan, Maya's head was spinning with operational details and contingency protocols. But she also felt exhilarated. These people were treating her like a capable partner rather than a liability to be managed. As they prepared to leave, Elena pulled Maya aside. You held your own tonight. That's rare in this world, someone who can think strategically under pressure. Victor's been an excellent teacher, Maya said diplomatically. Victor's been a different man since you came into his life, Elena corrected. More human, less isolated. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. He needs someone who sees him as more than just the crown he wears. The observation settled into Maya's chest, adding new dimension to her understanding of Victor's world. He wasn't just a king in his criminal empire. He was a man who'd sacrificed connection for power and was only now learning to want both. The drive back to Victor's penthouse was quiet, tension humming between them like a live wire. When they finally reached his home, Victor poured them both whiskey and stood at his windows, shoulders tight with everything he wasn't saying. Talk to me, Maya prompted gently. I hate this, Victor said flatly. I hate that Raphael's even thinking about you. I hate that using you strategically makes tactical sense. I hate that you're brave enough to volunteer for danger when every instinct I have screams to keep you away from it. Maya crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. I know, but this is who we are, Victor. I'm not someone who sits safely aside while you handle everything. That's not partnership. That's just another version of Ethan making me smaller to keep me manageable. Victor turned in her arms, his eyes blazing. This is nothing like Ethan. He diminished you because he was weak. I want to protect you because you're everything to me, and the thought of losing you is unbearable. The raw honesty of it stole Maya's breath. Then don't lose me. Trust that I'm strong enough to handle what comes. Trust that we're stronger together than we are apart. Victor's kiss was fierce and desperate, his hands pulling her closer as though he could absorb her into his very bones. Maya matched his intensity, pouring every ounce of certainty into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. One condition, Victor said roughly. The moment I feel like we're losing control of the situation, the moment the risk outweighs the strategic benefit, we shut it down. No arguments, no negotiations. Your safety is the line I won't cross. Deal, Maya agreed. As long as you remember I get input into what constitutes acceptable risk. We make these decisions together. Victor's smile was pained but genuine. You're going to give me gray hair. Probably, Maya admitted, but you'll look distinguished. They made love that night with an urgency born from fear and choice, and the absolute certainty that they were building something worth fighting for. Afterward, wrapped in sheets that smelled like Victor and safety, Maya let herself believe they could actually do this, navigate his dangerous world together, turn vulnerabilities into strategies, build a partnership strong enough to withstand whatever Rafael Vega or anyone else threw at them. As she drifted towards sleep, Victor's arms solid around her, Maya's last conscious thought was that she had finally found what she'd been looking for when she walked away from Ethan Rowe. Not safety or conventional happiness, but the fierce, exhilarating truth of being completely seen and choosing danger anyway. Tomorrow they'd start planning their strategy against Raphael. Tomorrow, she'd continue her training with Sarah and begin learning to handle firearms. Tomorrow the risks would feel real and immediate. But tonight, in this moment, Maya was simply a woman in love with a dangerous man who loved her back with an intensity that should have terrified her, but instead made her feel invincible. Morning arrived with the sharp clarity that comes after making consequential decisions. Maya woke to find Victor already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression that managed to be both tender and troubled. "How long have you been staring at me?" she asked, her voice still rough with sleep. "Long enough to memorize every detail in case I need to remember this moment later." Victor's fingers traced the curve of her jaw with reverent precision. "Long enough to question every choice that's led us here." Maya caught his hand, pressing a kiss to his palm. "Second thoughts about using me as part of your strategy against Raphael?" "Second, third, and fourth thoughts." Victor's mouth twisted. "But also recognition that you're right. We're stronger playing offense than defense. Doesn't mean I have to like it." They lay tangled together as sunlight painted Miami in shades of gold and promise, both understanding that the peace of this moment was temporary. Soon they'd have to rise and dress and step back into the complicated choreography of Victor's world. But for now, Maya let herself simply exist in the warmth of his arms, storing the feeling against future uncertainties. Victor's phone shattered the moment with its insistent buzz. He reached for it with a sigh, his expression hardening as he read the message. "Lorenzo, Raphael's requested a meeting for tomorrow evening. He's suggesting the Bellamy Club, neutral territory, public enough to discourage violence." "That's fast," Maya observed, sitting up and pulling the sheet around herself. "He must be more eager than we thought. Or more arrogant." Victor's jaw tightened. "The Bellamy is one of his preferred locations. He's probably assuming I'll be uncomfortable there, off balance. It's a power play." Maya processed this, her mind already working through implications. "Then we use his assumptions. You go in appearing concerned about me, maybe even slightly desperate. Meanwhile, what intelligence are we actually trying to gather?" Victor looked at her with an expression caught between admiration and frustration. "You're really committed to this." "I'm committed to us," Maya corrected, "which means I'm committed to neutralizing threats before they can actually hurt us. Now answer the question. What do we need to learn about Raphael's operations?" They spent the next hour strategizing over coffee, Victor gradually warming to the tactical aspects even as his protective instincts remained visibly strained. Raphael controlled port operations that Victor wanted to acquire, but recent intelligence suggested his shipping manifest didn't match his declared cargo. If they could prove he was moving contraband without proper organizational approval, they could use that leverage to force him out. "We need access to his shipping records," Victor explained, pulling up encrypted files on his tablet. "Physical or digital, doesn't matter, but his security is tight. He doesn't trust anyone enough to give them full access." "Except maybe someone he thinks is an unsophisticated civilian," Maya said slowly. "Someone like me." Victor's expression turned thunderous. "Absolutely not. I'm not sending you into Raphael's orbit as some kind of corporate spy." "You're not sending me anywhere," Maya said patiently. "I'm volunteering to help solve a problem that affects both of us, and you're going to trust me enough to let me." The argument that followed was intense but ultimately productive. Victor laid out every danger, every way the plan could fail catastrophically. Maya countered with strategic thinking and surprising tactical knowledge gleaned from 18 months of watching Victor operate. By the time Lorenzo arrived an hour later, they'd hammered out a framework that made Victor's protective instincts marginally less outraged. Lorenzo listened to their plan with characteristic calm before offering his assessment. "It could work." Raphael's arrogant enough to underestimate a woman, especially one he thinks is just Victor's romantic weakness. "But Maya, you understand the risks. If Raphael suspects you're gathering intelligence, he won't just threaten you, he'll use you as an example." "I understand," Maya said firmly, ignoring the ice sliding down her spine. "Which is why we're going to make sure he never suspects. I'm just Victor's concerned girlfriend, present at the meeting because he insisted on keeping me close. Maybe I'm nervous. Maybe I'm clingy. Whatever sells the narrative that I'm a civilian who doesn't understand the game being played." "You're terrifyingly good at this," Lorenzo observed with something like respect. "Victor, you've found yourself a strategist." "I found myself a heart attack," Victor muttered, but his hand found Maya's and held tight. The next 24 hours blurred into intensive preparation. Sarah drilled Maya on surveillance techniques, how to palm a small recording device, where to place it for optimal audio capture, how to photograph documents quickly without appearing to do so. James taught her escape protocols and distress signals, making her practice until the movements became instinctive. And Victor, despite his obvious discomfort with the entire plan, helped Maya craft her cover story until it was bulletproof. "You're scared," Maya practiced in the mirror of Victor's bedroom, modulating her voice to sound uncertain. "You don't understand why these men are interested in you, but you trust Victor to handle it. You just wish you could go back to your normal life where the biggest problem was managing his calendar." "I hate hearing you sound diminished," Victor said from where he leaned against the doorframe, "even knowing its performance." Maya turned to face him, dropping the act. "That's who I used to be, Victor. Before I learned I could be more." Raphael will see what he expects to see. A woman who got lucky catching a powerful man's attention, but doesn't actually understand his world. We're going to use his condescension as a weapon. The evening of the meeting arrived with the weight of consequence. Maya dressed carefully in a pale pink dress that walked the line between elegant and slightly too sweet, the kind of thing a woman might wear when trying to impress her boyfriend's business associates without understanding the actual power dynamics. She left her hair soft and loose, her makeup natural, her jewelry minimal. When she studied her reflection, she saw someone who could be dismissed as decorative rather than dangerous. Victor, by contrast, was all sharp edges and controlled menace in a black suit that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent used to be. But his eyes, when he looked at her, held barely suppressed fear. "Last chance to back out," he said quietly. "I can handle Raphael without using you as bait." "We've been over this," Maya reminded him gently. "I'm not bait. I'm a strategic asset who happens to look like something harmless. Now, are you going to trust me or not?" Victor pulled her close, his kiss thorough and desperate. "I trust you completely. It's the rest of the world I don't trust." They arrived at the Bellamy Club with Sarah and James in the car behind them, plus 3 additional security personnel stationed around the venue. The club itself was all dark wood and leather, money and masculine power condensed into expensive real estate. Maya felt eyes tracking her as Victor guided her through the main room toward a private dining area, his hand possessive on her lower back. Rafael Vega waited in a booth that gave him sight lines to all entrances, strategic positioning that Victor would have done himself. He was handsome in a polished way, late 40s with silver threading his dark hair and the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. 2 men flanked him, clearly security, though they wore expensive suits rather than obvious tactical gear. "Victor," Raphael said, rising with practiced charm. "And this must be the famous Maya Collins, the woman who's had all of Miami talking." Maya let Victor make the introductions, playing her role of slightly overwhelmed girlfriend with careful precision. She shook Raphael's hand with just a hint of nervousness, smiled too brightly, and sat a fraction closer to Victor than strictly necessary. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," Raphael continued once they'd settled. "I know tensions have been high lately, and I thought a civilized conversation might help clear the air." "Tensions you created by encroaching on established territories," Victor said mildly, though steel ran beneath his words. "But I'm willing to listen." The waiter appeared with drinks, whiskey for the men, white wine for Maya that she barely touched. Raphael made small talk while they ordered, asking Maya innocuous questions about her work with Victor, complimenting her dress, generally behaving like a charming host. Maya played along, offering careful responses that suggested intelligence but not strategic thinking. "Victor's taught me so much about business," she said with what she hoped looked like genuine admiration. "Though I have to admit, some of the details go over my head. I'm much better with schedules and organization than actual strategy." She felt Victor's hand tighten fractionally on her knee beneath the table, the only sign he gave of hating every diminished word coming from her mouth. Raphael, meanwhile, seemed to relax slightly, clearly dismissing her as irrelevant to the actual negotiations. "A beautiful woman doesn't need to understand business," Raphael said with condescension that made Maya want to throw her wine in his face. "She just needs to understand her man. And clearly you understand Victor quite well." The conversation shifted to the actual purpose of the meeting. Raphael's proposal for dividing port access and shipping routes. He painted it as mutually beneficial, but Maya recognized the trap embedded in his offer. He wanted Victor to cede control of 3 key shipping lanes in exchange for reduced competition in others. On the surface, it seemed reasonable. In reality, it would cut Victor off from his most profitable import routes. "I'll need time to consider," Victor said carefully. "These kinds of decisions affect my entire operation." "Of course," Raphael agreed smoothly. "Though I should mention that my offer has an expiration date. Some of my associates are less patient than I am. They'd prefer more aggressive approaches to resolving our territorial disputes." The threat was clear if subtle. Maya let her eyes widen slightly, her hand finding Victor's arm. "What does he mean, aggressive approaches?" "Nothing you need to worry about," Victor assured her, his tone gentle even as his eyes remained locked on Raphael. "Business disagreements sometimes get heated. It's normal." Raphael's smile sharpened. "Victor's being modest. Our business can be quite dangerous when interests conflict, which is why I'm hoping we can reach an agreement that keeps everyone safe, including lovely Maya here." The explicit threat against her hung in the air like poison gas. Maya let her expression shift to poorly concealed fear, her grip on Victor's arm tightening. "Victor, maybe you should just accept his offer. I don't want you in danger because of business disputes." "Maya," Victor started, but Raphael interrupted. "A wise woman. You should listen to her, Victor. Some things are worth more than territorial pride." His eyes flicked to Maya with calculating assessment. "Beautiful things are so fragile. It would be tragic if something happened because of stubbornness." Victor's entire body went rigid, and Maya recognized the moment when his control began to fracture. She needed to de-escalate before he did something that would blow their entire strategy. "Excuse me," Maya said, her voice carrying just the right note of distress. "I need to use the restroom. This conversation is making me uncomfortable." She stood quickly, not waiting for permission, and headed toward the back of the restaurant where she'd memorized the restroom locations during their planning. Sarah had positioned herself near the hallway, and Maya caught her eye as she passed, the signal that everything was proceeding according to plan. Inside the women's restroom, Maya took several deep breaths, centering herself. She had maybe 3 minutes before her absence would seem suspicious. Moving quickly, she pulled out her phone and sent a pre-written text to Lorenzo. Raphael making explicit threats. Victor holding, but barely. Proceeding to phase 2. The response came within seconds. Surveillance active. "We're recording everything. Stay safe." Maya checked her reflection, making sure she looked appropriately rattled, then headed back toward the dining room. But as she rounded the corner, she nearly collided with Raphael, who'd apparently followed her. "Sorry," Maya said quickly, stepping back. "I didn't see you there." "My apologies for unsettling you," Raphael said, though his expression suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "Victor can be very protective. I imagine he doesn't often bring you into his business dealings." "This is the first time," Maya admitted, which was technically true. "I didn't realize it would be so intense." Raphael studied her with unnerving focus, and Maya had to consciously prevent herself from meeting his gaze with the strength she actually possessed. Instead, she looked down, fidgeted with her clutch, embodied uncertainty. "Victor's world is not meant for civilians," Raphael said softly. "Women like you get hurt when they're caught between men like us. You seem intelligent enough to understand that." The condescension was so thick Maya could have choked on it, but she forced herself to nod. "I just want him to be safe. I don't understand why you can't both succeed without fighting." "Because some of us refuse to share," Raphael said, his tone darkening. "Victor's very possessive about what he considers his territories, businesses, beautiful women. It makes him inflexible when he should be strategic." He leaned closer, and Maya had to force herself not to recoil. "If you really care about keeping him safe, you might convince him that compromise is wiser than stubbornness. Unless you want to learn firsthand what happens when business disputes turn violent." The threat was unmistakable now, wrapped in false concern but absolutely clear. Maya let her eyes widen with genuine fear, not of Raphael himself, but of how Victor would react when he learned about this conversation. "I should get back," Maya said, her voice deliberately unsteady. "Victor will worry." "Of course," so Raphael stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. Think about what I said. Sometimes the people we love need to be protected from their own pride. Maya returned to the table where Victor sat with the tension of a caged predator. His eyes tracked her face, clearly reading distress in her expression, and his hand immediately found hers. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Fine," Maya said too quickly. "Just needed a moment." Raphael returned seconds later, his expression pleasant and entirely unthreatening. "I hope you're feeling better, Maya. These business discussions can be overwhelming." "She's fine," Victor said, his voice carrying an edge that made Raphael's security personnel shift slightly. "And we're done here. I'll consider your proposal and respond within the week." "I look forward to hearing from you," Raphael said smoothly. "Though I do hope you'll take Maya's concerns into account. She seems genuinely worried about your safety. It would be a shame if her fears proved justified." The ride back to Victor's penthouse was silent and charged with tension. Maya could feel rage rolling off him in waves, his jaw so tight she worried he'd crack a tooth. Sarah and James followed in the car behind, while Lorenzo had texted that he'd meet them at the penthouse with the surveillance footage. The moment they entered Victor's home, he rounded on her with controlled fury. "What did Raphael say to you in the hallway? And don't tell me nothing. I saw your face when you came back." Maya recounted the conversation with precise detail, watching Victor's expression shift from anger to something colder and far more dangerous. When she finished, he was pacing like a caged animal, his hands clenched into fists. "He threatened you," Victor said flatly. "Directly threatened you to your face while trying to use you to manipulate me. That's a line he doesn't get to cross." "Victor, we expected this," Maya said, though her own hands were trembling slightly with delayed reaction. "This is exactly the kind of arrogance we were hoping for. He dismissed me completely, didn't even consider I might be gathering intelligence or that the conversation was being recorded." Lorenzo arrived moments later with equipment in hand, already pulling up audio and video files. They gathered around Victor's dining table as he played back the evening. Every threat, every condescending assumption, Raphael's hallway confrontation with Maya captured in crystal clarity from Sarah's concealed surveillance position. "This is good," Lorenzo said with grim satisfaction. "Raphael's people won't tolerate him making unauthorized threats against another organization's assets. He's supposed to negotiate with approval from the council, not freelance intimidation tactics." "Assets," Victor repeated, his voice dangerous. "She's not an asset, Lorenzo. She's Maya, and Raphael put his hands on her." Maya looked up sharply. "He didn't touch me." "He got within a foot of you while making threats," Victor countered. "That's too close. That's invasion of personal space designed to intimidate. That's unacceptable." "But strategically useful," Maya insisted. "Victor, we got exactly what we needed. Proof that Raphael's acting without authorization, making threats he can't back up, underestimating his opponents. This gives us leverage." Lorenzo nodded slowly. "She's right. We can take this to the council, demonstrate that Raphael's becoming a liability. Combined with the shipping irregularities we've been documenting, it might be enough to force him out entirely." Victor stood abruptly, moving to the windows that overlooked the city. Maya exchanged glances with Lorenzo before following, placing a gentle hand on Victor's rigid back. "Talk to me," she said softly. "I miscalculated," Victor said, his voice rough. "I thought I could use you strategically without actually putting you in danger. But seeing him that close to you, hearing him make threats while I sat 50 feet away, unable to stop him." He broke off, his jaw working. "I can't do this, Maya. I can't use you as a piece on the board, even when it makes tactical sense." Maya moved to face him, forcing him to look at her. "You're not using me. I'm choosing to be part of this. There's a difference." "Is there?" Victor's eyes were tormented. "Because from where I'm standing, I brought you into my world and now dangerous men are threatening you. That's not partnership. That's me being selfish enough to want you despite the consequences." "Victor DeLuca," Maya said firmly, her hands framing his face. "Look at me. Really look at me. Do I seem traumatized, broken, diminished?" "You're shaking," Victor pointed out, catching her trembling hands. "Because adrenaline is a physical response to stress, not because Rafael Vega broke me." Maya held his gaze fiercely. "I'm scared, yes, but I'm also exhilarated because we pulled it off. We gathered the intelligence we needed, Raphael dismissed me completely, and now we have leverage. That's a win, Victor. Don't turn it into a failure because your protective instincts are screaming. Lorenzo cleared his throat from across the room. I'm going to step out. But for what it's worth, Maya's right. Raphael played exactly how we predicted. Now we use that against him. After Lorenzo left, Maya and Victor stood locked together in the middle of his living room, both processing what had happened and what it meant for their future. Finally, Victor pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate intensity. I'm terrified of losing you, he admitted against her hair, more terrified than I've been of anything in my entire life. Then hold on tighter, Maya said simply, but don't let fear make you push me away. That's the only thing that could actually break us. They stood like that for long minutes before Victor finally loosened his grip enough to meet her eyes. What do we do now? Now we follow through, Maya said with more confidence than she felt. We take the evidence to your council or whoever oversees these territorial disputes. We prove Raphael's a liability, and we do it together, as partners. The next 72 hours moved with the relentless momentum of strategy executed. Lorenzo compiled their evidence into a comprehensive presentation. Audio recordings, shipping manifests that didn't match declared cargo, witness statements from port workers Raphael had intimidated. Victor called in favors and scheduled a council meeting, the criminal organization's version of corporate arbitration. Maya continued her training with Sarah and James, partly for practical skill development, but mostly because the physical exertion helped process her churning anxiety. She was learning to shoot now, actual firearms at an indoor range that catered to people who needed absolute discretion. The first time she'd held a gun, her hands had shaken so badly Sarah had to help her steady her grip. By the third session, Maya could hit center mass on a target at 20 feet with reasonable accuracy. You're a natural, James observed after watching her empty a magazine with improved precision. Most people tense up, jerk the trigger, you're staying calm, controlling your breathing. I spent 2 years learning to stay calm under pressure, Maya said, reloading with movements that were becoming automatic. This is just a different application of the same skill. The evening of the council meeting, Victor tried one more time to convince Maya to stay home. This isn't your world, he said, though his heart clearly wasn't in the argument. You've done enough. This is my world now, Maya countered, and I want to see it through, unless you're actually forbidding me to come. I would never forbid you anything, Victor said with a tired smile. I'm just terrified something will go wrong, and I'll lose you. Then we'll be terrified together, Maya said, pressing a kiss to his jaw. But we'll face it together too. The council met in a warehouse in Wynwood that had been converted into something between a boardroom and a fortress. Security was overwhelming. Armed guards at every entrance, metal detectors, surveillance equipment that probably cost more than Maya's car. The council itself consisted of 7 individuals who represented different factions of Miami's organized crime landscape, each one radiating the kind of power that came from surviving in a world where mistakes were often fatal. Victor presented their case with devastating precision, laying out Raphael's unauthorized threats, his shipping irregularities, and his pattern of overreach that threatened the careful balance everyone had worked to maintain. Maya sat beside him, silent but present, her very existence a reminder of why this mattered. Raphael defended himself with smooth arrogance, trying to paint Victor as paranoid and possessive, Maya as an overreaction to a simple business disagreement. But when Lorenzo played the audio of Raphael's hallway confrontation with Maya, the temperature in the room shifted dramatically. You threatened his woman? One of the council members said, her voice sharp with disapproval. In a neutral location, without authorization, while supposedly negotiating in good faith? I was simply pointing out the risks of stubbornness, Raphael said, though uncertainty had crept into his expression. Making sure she understood the stakes. You made explicit threats designed to intimidate a civilian into manipulating Victor's business decisions, another council member corrected. That's not negotiation, that's coercion, and doing it without council approval violates our operational protocols. The debate that followed was intense and conducted in coded language Maya was still learning to interpret. But the outcome became clear when the council voted 5-2 to strip Raphael of his port operations and redistribute them among other factions, with Victor receiving the majority share for having brought the irregularities to their attention. Raphael's face went white with fury. This is political persecution. Victor's using his woman as an excuse to seize my territory. Victor's using your violation of protocols to rightfully claim operations you've been mismanaging, the lead council member said coldly. You have 72 hours to transfer operational control. Resist and face consequences. Accepted? Raphael's jaw clenched, but he nodded stiffly. His eyes, when they found Maya, held pure venom, and she understood with sudden clarity that this wasn't over. He'd been publicly humiliated and forced to surrender valuable territory. Men like Raphael didn't forgive or forget that kind of defeat. The realization must have shone on her face because Victor's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. The ride back to Victor's penthouse should have felt triumphant. Instead, Maya felt the weight of new understanding settling over her. This was her life now, navigating criminal politics and territorial disputes, making enemies of dangerous men, constantly calculating threats and strategic responses. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. You're quiet, Victor observed as they entered his home. I'm processing, Maya admitted. We won, but we also just made a very dangerous enemy. Raphael's not going to accept this gracefully. No, Victor agreed. He's going to look for revenge, which is why your security detail is being doubled starting tomorrow, and why I want you to consider moving in here where I can better ensure your safety. Maya turned to face him fully, recognizing the request for what it was. Not control, but genuine fear for her well-being. Ask me properly, she said softly. Not as a security measure, but as something you actually want. Victor's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing strategic calculation. Maya Collins, would you move in with me? Not because it's safer, though it is. Not because it makes logistical sense, though it does. But because I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Because I want this to be our home, not just mine. Because I'm tired of being alone, and you've shown me what partnership actually feels like. The words settled into Maya's chest, warm and precious and absolutely terrifying in their implications. Moving in with Victor meant fully committing to this life, accepting all its dangers and complications. It meant becoming a visible, permanent part of his world with all the risks that entailed. It also meant choosing love over safety, partnership over isolation, extraordinary over ordinary. Yes, Maya said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the decision. Yes, I'll move in with you. I'll build a home with you. I'll face whatever comes as your partner. Victor's kiss was deep and claiming, his arms pulling her close as though he could absorb her into his very soul. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes shone with emotion he usually kept carefully controlled. I love you, he said roughly. I should have said it before now, but I'm saying it clearly now. I love you, Maya Collins. Completely. Irrevocably. In ways that terrify me and make me braver at the same time. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Happy tears. Overwhelmed tears. Tears of recognition and relief and absolute certainty. I love you too, Victor DeLuca. Even though you're dangerous and overprotective and make enemies of violent criminals, I love you anyway. They made love that night with new urgency, sealing their commitment with touch and breath and whispered promises. Afterward, wrapped in sheets that smelled like both of them now, Maya let herself imagine their future, a life built on truth and choice and the fierce determination to protect what they were creating together. We should probably prepare for Raphael's retaliation, Maya said eventually, her practical nature reasserting itself even in the afterglow. Tomorrow, Victor murmured against her hair. Tonight, I just want to hold you and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. Maya smiled, burrowing deeper into his warmth. Deal. But tomorrow, we plan. Together. Together, Victor agreed, his arms tightening around her. Always together. Tomorrow arrived with the brutal efficiency of consequences deferred but never forgotten. Maya woke to find Victor already dressed, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in rapid Italian, a language he only used when discussing things he didn't want overheard. His expression was carved from stone, and when he noticed her watching, he ended the call abruptly. What's happened? Maya asked, sitting up with the sheet clutched to her chest. Raphael made his move faster than anticipated, Victor said, his voice tight with controlled fury. 3 of my legitimate businesses were raided by federal agents this morning. Anonymous tips about tax evasion and money laundering, complete with fabricated documentation that's just convincing enough to tie up my operations for months. Maya's stomach dropped. He's trying to bleed you financially, make you vulnerable while he regroups. Exactly. Victor moved to the windows, his shoulders rigid. And it's working. My lawyers are handling the legal aspects. But this kind of scrutiny means I have to pull back from several operations until the heat dies down. Raphael's counting on me being too distracted to notice whatever else he's planning. Then we don't get distracted, Maya said firmly, climbing out of bed and wrapping herself in Victor's discarded shirt. We handle the legal crisis while staying alert to other threats. What does Lorenzo recommend? Victor turned to look at her, something shifting in his expression. You're not frightened by this? The reality that dating me means federal raids and legal battles? I'm terrified, Maya admitted honestly. But I'm also committed. You don't get to scare me away with consequences we knew were possible, Victor. Now stop catastrophizing and tell me how I can help. The corner of Victor's mouth lifted slightly. How did I get so lucky? Excellent hiring practices, Maya said, moving to stand beside him. Now, talk strategy with me. The next week blurred into controlled chaos. Maya officially moved into Victor's penthouse, though most of her belongings remained in boxes as they navigated the legal storm Raphael had unleashed. Federal agents questioned everyone connected to Victor's businesses, clearly fishing for anything that would justify deeper investigation. Maya herself was interviewed twice, once at her former apartment and once at a downtown office that smelled like stale coffee and bureaucratic resignation. She'd prepared for the interviews with meticulous care, coached by Victor's lawyers until her story was bulletproof. Yes, she worked for Victor DeLuca as his executive assistant. No, she wasn't aware of any illegal activities. Yes, their relationship had recently become romantic. No, that didn't compromise her professional integrity. She'd helped manage his legitimate business interests long before they'd become personally involved. The agents had pushed, looking for inconsistencies or nervousness that might indicate deception. Maya had given them nothing but calm competence and carefully truthful responses that revealed exactly 0 useful information. When she'd finally been released, Sarah had been waiting outside with the car, her expression approving. You handled that like a professional, Sarah said as they drove back to the penthouse. Most civilians crumble under that kind of pressure. I'm not most civilians anymore, Maya replied, though her hands trembled slightly with delayed adrenaline. I'm Victor's partner. That means I need to be strong enough to handle whatever comes. Back at the penthouse, Maya found Victor in his office surrounded by lawyers and accountants, his expression grim as they discussed damage control strategies. When he saw her, relief flickered across his features before professional composure reasserted itself. Give us a moment, Victor said to his team, waiting until they'd filed out before pulling Maya into his arms. How bad was it? Invasive, but manageable, Maya said against his chest. They were fishing, but I didn't give them anything to work with. Your lawyers prepared me well. Victor's arms tightened. I hate that you have to deal with this, that you're being questioned by federal agents because you chose to be with me. Would you prefer I hadn't chosen you? Maya pulled back to meet his eyes. Because it's too late for regrets, Victor. We're in this together, which means we handle it together. Now tell me what else Raphael's done. The answer was grimly impressive in its scope. Beyond the federal raids, Raphael had orchestrated a coordinated attack on Victor's reputation. Leaked stories to gossip columnists painting him as a dangerous criminal who'd seduced an innocent civilian, whispered rumors to business associates suggesting Victor was becoming unstable and unreliable. Even anonymous tips to Maya's former colleagues implying she'd traded sexual favors for her position. He's trying to isolate you socially and professionally, Lorenzo explained when he arrived that evening with updated intelligence. Make you toxic to legitimate business contacts while making Maya seem like either a victim or an opportunist. It's actually quite sophisticated. It's also deeply personal, Maya observed, studying the compiled evidence of Raphael's campaign. This isn't just business retaliation. He's genuinely offended that we outmaneuvered him. His pride is wounded. Which makes him more dangerous, Victor said darkly. Wounded pride makes people reckless, and reckless enemies are unpredictable. The prediction proved accurate 3 days later when Maya was leaving her training session with Sarah. They just reached the parking garage when Sarah's entire body went tense, her hand moving to the concealed weapon at her hip. "Get behind me," Sarah said quietly, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "We have company." Maya's newly trained awareness kicked in, and she spotted them. 3 men positioned strategically around the garage, blocking the exits. They weren't trying to hide their presence, which somehow made it more threatening. These weren't muggers looking for an easy target. These were professionals making a statement. "Raphael's people?" Maya asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Almost certainly." Sarah had her phone out, texting rapidly with one hand while keeping the other near her weapon. "James is 2 minutes out. We just need to delay until backup arrives." The man closest to them stepped forward, his hands visible and empty, a show of non-aggression that Maya didn't believe for a second. "Miss Collins, Mr. Vega would like a word with you. Just a conversation, nothing threatening. He feels there's been a misunderstanding he'd like to address directly." "I'm not interested in conversations with men who send armed goons to parking garages," Maya said, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. "If Mr. Vega wants to communicate, he can go through proper channels." "Mr. Vega was hoping you'd be reasonable," the man said, his tone suggesting Maya's definition of reasonable differed significantly from Raphael's. He'd hate for misunderstandings to escalate into something more serious, especially when you could simply have a brief conversation and resolve everything peacefully. The implicit threat was clear: come willingly for a conversation, or be taken unwillingly for something worse. Maya felt ice slide down her spine even as fury burned in her chest. Raphael was trying to kidnap her in broad daylight, counting on her fear to make her compliant. "The lady said no," Sarah said coldly, her weapon now visible, though not yet pointed at anyone. "And I'd advise you gentlemen to leave before this situation deteriorates." "1 bodyguard against 3 of us," the spokesman said with false regret. "Those aren't favorable odds, even for someone with your reputation, Ms. Chen. Why don't we all stay calm?" And the screech of tires announced James's arrival, his car blocking the garage exit as he emerged with his own weapon drawn. The 2 additional security personnel Victor had assigned to Maya piled out behind him, and suddenly the odds had shifted dramatically. "You were saying something about unfavorable odds?" Sarah asked with grim satisfaction. "I believe you gentlemen are trespassing. I'd suggest you leave before we call the police. Or before Mr. DeLuca learns you tried to take his woman. I'm genuinely unsure which would be worse for you." Raphael's men exchanged glances before the spokesman offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just extending an invitation, no harm intended. Ms. Collins, please let Mr. Vega know if you reconsider his offer to talk." They retreated with deliberate casualness, but Maya saw the calculation in their movements. They'd tested Victor's security response and found it more robust than anticipated. This had been reconnaissance as much as an actual kidnapping attempt. "We need to leave," James said tersely, already guiding Maya toward his car. "Now, before they decide to escalate." The drive to Victor's penthouse was tense and silent, Sarah and James communicating in terse phrases while additional security vehicles formed a protective convoy. Maya sat in the back seat trying to process what had almost happened, her training warring with very reasonable terror. Victor met them at the entrance to his building, his face absolutely bloodless with rage. He pulled Maya into his arms with desperate intensity, his hands shaking slightly as they traced her face, her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries that didn't exist. "I'm fine," Maya assured him, though her own voice trembled. Sarah and James got there in time. Nothing happened. "Something almost happened," Victor said roughly, his eyes blazing with fury that wasn't directed at her. "Raphael sent men to take you from a public place in broad daylight. That's not business. That's war." They convened in Victor's office with Lorenzo, Sarah, James, and 3 other members of Victor's inner circle Maya had been introduced to over the past weeks. The atmosphere was charged with barely contained violence, everyone understanding that Raphael had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "He's desperate," Lorenzo said, pulling up security footage from the parking garage on his tablet. "The federal raids didn't hurt Victor as much as Raphael hoped, So now he's trying direct intimidation. Taking Maya would give him leverage for negotiations. Or a hostage to ensure I back off entirely, Victor said, his voice like cut glass. Either way, it ends now. I want Raphael dealt with permanently. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Maya understood what Victor was suggesting, not legal consequences or business retaliation, but the kind of permanent solution that happened in parking garages and deserted warehouses. No, Maya said clearly, drawing every eye in the room. Victor's gaze snapped to her, confusion and frustration warring in his expression. Maya, I said no, Maya repeated, standing to face the assembled group. Not because Raphael doesn't deserve consequences, but because killing him makes you a murderer and me complicit in murder. That's a line I won't cross, Victor, not even for safety. He tried to kidnap you, Victor said, his voice strained. He's made explicit threats against your life. What would you have me do? Ask him politely to stop? I'd have you be smarter than he is, Maya said firmly. Raphael's desperate and reckless. He's making mistakes, alienating people, violating protocols. We use that against him instead of giving him martyrdom and making ourselves criminals in the process. Lorenzo was watching her with something like fascination. What did you have in mind? Maya moved to the tablet, studying the footage of Raphael's men. They approached me in a parking garage with security cameras. They made explicit threats that can be documented. Raphael's already on thin ice with the council for his unauthorized actions. What if we give them proof he's escalated to kidnapping attempts? That he's become such a liability that removing him is necessary for everyone's safety? The council doesn't care about attempted kidnapping, one of Victor's men said dismissively. They care about profit and stability. Then we show them how Raphael's actions threaten both, Maya countered, her mind working through strategy. His federal raids against Victor have drawn unwanted attention to everyone's operations. His kidnapping attempt proves he's willing to violate every protocol in pursuit of revenge. And if we can document other reckless acts, other times he's put the entire organization at risk for personal vendettas, we make him radioactive. Victor studied her with an expression caught between admiration and concern. You're suggesting we build a case for the council to eliminate Raphael themselves. I'm suggesting we use the system against him instead of becoming vigilantes, Maya said. You've spent years building power within this world's structures, Victor. Use that power. Make Raphael's removal a necessity rather than revenge. The discussion that followed was intense and technical, everyone contributing intelligence about Raphael's recent actions. It turned out Maya's near kidnapping wasn't his only reckless move. He'd been pressuring other council members for support, threatening people who wouldn't back him, generally behaving like someone who considered himself above the rules everyone else followed. If we compile all of this and present it properly, we might actually pull this off, Lorenzo said slowly. Make Raphael's removal a council decision rather than Victor's personal vendetta. It's still incredibly dangerous, Sarah pointed out. If Raphael learns we're building a case against him, he might accelerate his timeline. Try to take Maya before we can move against him. Then we don't give him time, Victor said, his strategic mind clearly engaging despite his emotional resistance. We move fast, compile everything within 48 hours, and call an emergency council session. Raphael won't expect us to go through official channels after he tried to kidnap Maya. The plan took shape with brutal efficiency. Lorenzo coordinated intelligence gathering while Victor reached out to council members he trusted, laying groundwork for the emergency session. Maya worked with the lawyers to ensure all documentation was legally defensible. They might be operating in criminal circles, but presenting evidence still required precision and credibility. Through it all, Victor's security around Maya became suffocating. She couldn't move from one room to another without armed guards, couldn't leave the penthouse without a minimum of 4 security personnel, couldn't even stand near windows without Sarah or James materializing beside her. It was necessary and strategic and absolutely maddening. I'm going to lose my mind if this continues much longer, Maya told Victor on the second night as they prepared for bed under what felt like armed surveillance. Better to lose your mind than your life, Victor said, though he looked as strained as she felt. Just a few more days, Maya. Once the council deals with Raphael, things will calm down. And if they don't? Maya asked. If this is just what life is now, constant threats and security protocols and looking over our shoulders? Victor pulled her close, his arms solid and reassuring. Then we handle it together. We build a life strong enough to withstand the chaos. We refuse to let fear win. He pulled back to meet her eyes. But I need you to promise me something. What? If this goes wrong, if Raphael manages to get to you despite all our precautions, I need you to survive. Do whatever it takes to stay alive until I can get to you. Don't be brave. Don't resist if it puts you in more danger. Just survive. The raw fear in his voice broke something in Maya's chest. Victor, promise me, he insisted. Because I can survive a lot of things, Maya, but I cannot survive losing you. That would break something in me that couldn't be fixed. Maya pressed her forehead to his, breathing him in. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to survive, but you have to promise me something too. Anything. Promise you won't let revenge destroy you if something does happen. Promise you'll stay the man I fell in love with, the one who's capable of violence but chooses strategy, who protects people but doesn't become a monster in the process. Victor's laugh was pained. You're asking me to promise something I'm not sure I can deliver. Then try, Maya said simply. For me, try to be better than your worst instincts. The emergency council session was scheduled for the following evening at the same Wynwood warehouse where they'd previously met. Lorenzo had compiled a devastating presentation. Security footage of the kidnapping attempt, documentation of Raphael's federal raids, and the attention they'd drawn to everyone's operations. Witness statements from people Raphael had threatened. Financial records showing he'd been skimming from shared operations. It was comprehensive and damning, painting Raphael as a liability the entire organization couldn't afford. Maya dressed carefully for the meeting in a charcoal suit that split the difference between professional and armored. Victor had initially suggested she stay home, but Maya had shut that down immediately. This was about her safety, which meant she had a right to be present when decisions were made. The warehouse was even more heavily secured than before, everyone understanding the stakes involved. The 7 council members were already seated when Victor, Maya, and Lorenzo arrived, their expressions ranging from curious to annoyed at having been called to an emergency session. This better be important, DeLuca, the lead council member said without preamble. We don't appreciate being summoned on short notice. Rafael Vega attempted to kidnap my partner 2 days ago, Victor said flatly. In broad daylight, from a public parking garage, using armed personnel. I'm calling for his immediate removal from all council-sanctioned operations on grounds that he's become a threat to organizational security. The room erupted in overlapping voices, questions, objections, demands for proof. Lorenzo calmly began his presentation, walking them through each piece of evidence with methodical precision. Maya watched the council members' expressions shift from skepticism to concern to genuine alarm as the scope of Raphael's recklessness became clear. These federal raids have brought unprecedented attention to our operations, one council member said, studying financial reports that showed how Raphael's vendetta was affecting everyone's bottom line. We've had to suspend or relocate multiple operations because of increased scrutiny. And this kidnapping attempt, another added, watching security footage of Raphael's men confronting Maya, this is absolutely unacceptable. We have protocols specifically to prevent this kind of exposure. Grabbing someone in a public place with security cameras, what was he thinking? The door burst open before anyone could respond, Raphael himself striding in with 2 bodyguards, despite not being summoned to the meeting. His face was flushed with rage, his usual polish cracking to reveal something uglier beneath. This is a setup, Raphael snarled, pointing at Victor. DeLuca's using his woman to manipulate you all into giving him my territory. She's probably in on it, probably helped fabricate this entire narrative. Maya felt Victor tense beside her, but she placed a hand on his arm and stood herself, meeting Raphael's furious gaze with calm composure. Mr. Vega, she said, her voice steady, are you denying that your men approached me in a parking garage 2 days ago? Because we have security footage from multiple angles showing exactly that. I was extending an invitation to talk, Raphael said dismissively. Your security team overreacted to a simple conversation. Armed men blocking exits while demanding I accompany them constitutes kidnapping, not conversation, Maya said. But let's say you're right. Let's say it was just an invitation. What about the federal raids on Victor's businesses? The anonymous tips with fabricated evidence? The coordinated campaign to damage his reputation and isolate him professionally, were those also just conversations? Raphael's expression twisted with contempt. You think you're so clever, don't you? Some executive assistant who got lucky seducing a powerful man, now playing at being a strategist. You're out of your depth, sweetheart. Maybe, Maya acknowledged, but I'm smart enough to know that threatening and attempting to kidnap people breaks every protocol this council has established. I'm smart enough to understand that drawing federal attention to organized operations puts everyone at risk. And I'm definitely smart enough to let your own actions speak for themselves. She gestured to Lorenzo's presentation, still displayed on the large screen. Everything here is documented fact. You can dismiss me as Victor's naive girlfriend all you want, but you can't dismiss evidence. You made yourself a liability, Mr. Vega. We're just making sure everyone understands exactly how much of one. The silence that followed was absolute. Raphael looked like he wanted to lunge at Maya, his hands clenched into fists, his face mottled with rage. But the council members were studying him with new eyes, seeing not a peer but a problem that needed solving. Raphael, the lead council member said finally, you've violated multiple operational protocols. You've drawn federal attention that's cost us millions in suspended operations. You've made unauthorized threats and apparently attempted kidnapping. We can't afford this kind of instability. You're taking his side. Raphael's voice climbed toward hysteria. After everything I've done for this organization, after 20 years of loyal service, we're taking the organization's side, another council member corrected. You've become too personally invested in this vendetta. It's affecting your judgment and putting all of us at risk. Effective immediately, you're being removed from all council-sanctioned operations. Your territories will be redistributed, your accounts frozen pending review, and you're forbidden from retaliating against DeLuca or his associates. Violate these terms and face permanent consequences. The verdict was final and absolute. Raphael stood frozen, clearly unable to process that he'd just lost everything. When he finally moved, it was with the jerky uncertainty of someone whose world had just collapsed. This isn't over, Raphael said, his voice low and venomous. You think you've won, DeLuca, but all you've done is make an enemy who has nothing left to lose. Then I suggest you use your freedom wisely, Victor said, his tone carrying lethal calm. Because if you come near Maya again, council sanctions won't protect you. I will end you myself. Consequences be damned. Security escorted Raphael from the warehouse, his bodyguards following with visible discomfort. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her legs suddenly weak with delayed reaction. Victor's arm came around her waist, steadying her. You were magnificent, he murmured against her hair. Absolutely magnificent. The council members began filing out, several stopping to shake Victor's hand or nod respectfully at Maya. The lead council member paused before leaving, her sharp eyes assessing Maya with new interest. Miss Collins, you have a gift for strategy, she said. If you ever tire of being DeLuca's assistant, several of us would be interested in your services. I appreciate that, Maya said diplomatically, but I'm exactly where I want to be. The woman's smile was knowing. I suspected as much. Victor, you've found yourself quite a partner. Don't screw it up. After everyone had left, Maya, Victor, and Lorenzo stood in the empty warehouse processing what had just happened. They'd won. Raphael had been neutralized without violence, using the system's own structures against him. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, Maya felt exhausted and vaguely unsettled. Raphael's threat wasn't empty, Lorenzo said quietly. A man with nothing to lose is dangerous specifically because normal deterrents don't work. We need to maintain security protocols until we're certain he's truly backed down. Agreed, Victor said, though his arm around Maya remained protective. But for tonight, we've bought ourselves breathing room. That's more than we had this morning. The next several weeks passed in cautious normality. Raphael disappeared from Miami entirely. Rumors suggested he'd relocated to the Bahamas to lick his wounds and rebuild from scratch. Federal investigations into Victor's businesses gradually concluded with no charges filed, the fabricated evidence too obviously planted to withstand serious scrutiny. And slowly, carefully, Victor and Maya began building the life they'd fought so hard to protect. Maya's belongings finally emerged from boxes and found homes in Victor's penthouse. Her books integrated with his, her photos placed on tables beside his family pictures, her ridiculous cat claiming the sunniest windowsill as her domain. It started feeling less like Victor's space and more like theirs, a home built on shared choices rather than individual histories. The gossip columns eventually moved on to new scandals, though Maya occasionally still saw references to herself as Victor DeLuca's mysterious partner or the woman who tamed Miami's most eligible bachelor. She learned to ignore it, understanding that public perception mattered less than private reality. Her relationship with Victor deepened in ways both profound and ordinary. They learned each other's routines and preferences, navigated disagreements with gradually improving communication, discovered that partnership meant choosing each other even when it would be easier not to. Victor's protective instincts remained overwhelming at times, but he was genuinely trying to trust Maya's strength. And Maya was learning to accept protection when it was offered out of love rather than control. 6 months after the council meeting, Victor took Maya back to the Fontainebleau, where this had all begun. They walked the same ballroom where Ethan had tried to diminish her, and where Victor had publicly claimed her, their fingers threaded together as they remembered. "Do you ever regret it?" Victor asked quietly. "Choosing this life? All the danger and complications that come with being mine?" Maya considered the question seriously, thinking about federal interrogations and kidnapping attempts and learning to handle firearms. She thought about the fear and uncertainty, the constant awareness of threats, the reality of loving someone whose enemies became her enemies. "No," she said finally, meeting his eyes, "because all of that came with you. With partnership and honesty and being seen completely, I'd rather have this, complicated and dangerous and real, than spend my life playing it safe and being half alive." Victor's smile was brilliant and unguarded. "I was hoping you'd say that." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, dropping to one knee right there in the center of the ballroom. Maya's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring that was beautiful and unconventional, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and perfect. "Maya Collins," Victor said, his voice carrying across the empty ballroom, "you walked into my life and changed everything. You refused to be diminished or protected or treated as anything less than an equal partner. You challenged me to be better while accepting exactly who I am. You're the bravest person I've ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life worthy of that bravery. Will you marry me?" Maya dropped to her knees in front of him, framing his face with her hands. "Yes, absolutely yes. I'll marry you and build a life with you and face whatever comes as your partner and your equal." The ring slid onto her finger with perfect precision, catching the light and throwing rainbow refractions across the polished floor. Victor kissed her there in the ballroom where they'd first really seen each other, and Maya kissed him back with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Their wedding 6 months later was small and intensely private, just Victor's inner circle and Maya's family, held in the penthouse with Miami glittering beneath them like scattered stars. Maya wore ivory silk that made her feel powerful and beautiful, while Victor looked devastating in midnight blue that matched her engagement ring. They wrote their own vows, speaking truths about choice and partnership and refusing to let fear win. "I promise to trust your strength even when my instincts scream to protect you," Victor said, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise to stand beside you rather than in front of you. I promise to build a life with you, not for you." "I promise to be brave enough to stay when things get hard," Maya replied, tears streaming down her face. "I promise to be your partner in every sense, in strategy and danger and the quiet moments between. I promise to choose you every day, even when easier options exist." When the officiant pronounced them married, Victor pulled Maya into a kiss that tasted like promise and possession and absolute commitment. Their assembled guests erupted in applause, but Maya barely heard it, too focused on the man who'd just become her husband, dangerous and devoted and entirely hers. The reception flowed with champagne and laughter and toasts that ranged from sentimental to strategically vague about exactly what Victor did for a living. Elena gave a speech about partnership that made several people cry. Lorenzo offered dry observations about Victor's transformation from isolated king to devoted husband that made everyone laugh. And Maya's sister Jessica, who'd flown in from Phoenix with dramatically revised opinions about Maya's choices, admitted she'd been wrong to doubt. "He looks at you like you're the only person in the world," Jessica said, watching Victor across the room. "And you look at him the same way. I'm sorry I suggested you were out of your league. Clearly, you're exactly where you belong." As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Victor pulled Maya onto the balcony where they'd watched so many sunrises together. Miami sprawled beneath them, beautiful and dangerous and full of possibilities. "What are you thinking?" Maya asked, leaning into his solid warmth. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," Victor said simply. "That somehow I found someone brave enough to love me completely while refusing to tolerate my worst instincts. That we're going to build something extraordinary together." "We already have," Maya said, turning in his arms to face him. "We've built a partnership strong enough to survive federal investigations and kidnapping attempts and criminal politics. Everything else is just details." Victor's laugh was warm and genuine. "Just details. You realize most people would consider those things fairly significant?" "Most people aren't us," Maya countered. "We're not normal, Victor. We never will be. But we're real and we're committed and we're choosing each other with full awareness of what that means. That's better than normal." They stood wrapped together as the city lights below them flickered like earthbound constellations. Two people who'd chosen danger over safety and found something more valuable than either: genuine partnership built on truth and trust and the willingness to face consequences together. Over the following years, they built the life they'd promised each other. Victor gradually transitioned more of his operations to legitimate business, using his criminal empire's resources to fund legal ventures that could withstand scrutiny. Maya became his true partner, not just his assistant or his wife, but his equal in strategy and decision-making. Together they were formidable, respected, and slightly feared in both legal and illegal circles. They faced new threats as they came: rivals who tested their defenses, legal challenges that required careful navigation, the constant balancing act of living between worlds. But they faced everything together, honoring the vows they'd made to trust each other's strength and choose partnership over isolation. When their daughter was born 3 years after their wedding, Victor held the tiny bundle with the same careful intensity he brought to everything he loved. "She's perfect," he whispered, his eyes wet with emotion Maya had learned to treasure. "Absolutely perfect." "She's ours," Maya corrected, watching her husband cradle their child with reverent gentleness. "And she's going to be fierce and brave and completely herself, because that's what we'll teach her." Their son arrived 2 years later, completing their family in ways neither had anticipated wanting. Parenthood forced new considerations: how to keep children safe in a dangerous world, how to teach them their father's strength without his violence, how to build a legacy that offered choice rather than obligation. "What do we tell them?" Victor asked one night, watching their children sleep in the nursery he'd had custom built. "When they're old enough to ask what I really do." "We tell them the truth," Maya said firmly, "that you built power from nothing to protect people you love, that you made hard choices in impossible situations, that you're not perfect, but you've always tried to be better. And we let them decide for themselves who they want to become." It was the same philosophy they applied to everything: honesty over comfortable lies, choice over obligation, partnership over control. They weren't perfect parents or partners or people, but they were real, and they were committed, and they built a family strong enough to withstand whatever came. Years later, when Maya looked back on the night at the gala that changed everything, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. The woman who'd let Ethan Rowe make her small seemed like a different person entirely, someone Maya had been but no longer recognized. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer, absolutely certain of her own worth. She'd chosen danger over diminishment, passion over safety, extraordinary over ordinary. She'd refused to be protected or managed or treated as anything less than equal. And in return, she'd found a love that was real and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. Standing on the balcony of the home she'd built with Victor, watching their children play in the Miami sunshine while her husband worked in his office, Maya felt complete in ways she'd never imagined possible. This wasn't the life she'd planned or expected. It was better, messier, and more dangerous, and infinitely more real than anything she'd dared to want. Victor emerged from his office and crossed to her, his arms wrapping around her waist as he pulled her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" "How far we've come," Maya said, covering his hands with hers. "How much we've built together. How grateful I am that I was brave enough to choose you." "I'm the one who should be grateful," Victor murmured against her hair. "You saved me, Maya, from isolation and loneliness and becoming something less than human. You reminded me what it meant to be whole." Maya turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him with all the love and certainty she possessed. "We saved each other," she corrected. "That's what partners do." And in that moment, standing in the home they'd built and the life they'd chosen, surrounded by evidence of their commitment and partnership, Maya knew with absolute certainty that she'd found exactly what she'd been looking for when she walked away from Ethan Rowe. Not safety or conventional happiness, but the fierce, beautiful truth of being completely seen and choosing to stay anyway. The woman Ethan had once called not special enough had become extraordinary. Not because of Victor's love or status or protection, but because she'd learned to see her own worth and refuse anything less than she deserved. She'd built a life on her own terms, chosen a partner who saw her as an equal, and created a family rooted in truth and choice and unwavering commitment. And if Ethan Rowe occasionally saw news articles about Victor and Maya DeLuca, now prominent in Miami's philanthropic circles, their legitimate business empire growing, their family beautiful and thriving, she hoped he understood exactly what he'd lost. Not just a woman, but the possibility of genuine partnership with someone brave enough to demand better. But mostly, Maya didn't think about Ethan at all. He was a footnote in her history, a lesson learned about knowing her worth. Her present and her future belonged to Victor, to their children, to the extraordinary life they were building together one choice at a time. As sunset painted Miami in shades of gold and promise, Maya stood beside the man she'd chosen and the life they'd built, knowing with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, not in spite of the danger and complication, but because of the honesty and partnership and fierce love that made it all worthwhile. She was no longer the woman who'd been diminished by Ethan Rowe's condescension. She was Maya DeLuca, partner, strategist, mother, and the woman brave enough to choose extraordinary over ordinary, danger over diminishment, and real love over safe comfort. And she'd never looked back.